They just started spraying everyone. There was so much media there, and I reckon so many people from the media just got sprayed. We were just covering what was happening, and they just... They just started spraying everyone. There was so much media there, and I reckon so many people from the media just got sprayed. We were just covering what was happening, and they just started spraying everyone.
Today you're actually working for mainstream media?
Yeah, for The Age.
And
It makes no difference with the police, my friend. They just looked at me, aimed at me, and they just went for it. I worked all over. I worked in Latin America, Asia, you name it. You know what? I've been in Latin America, in Chile, when there's riot police, when they see the full riot police coming towards you, you just lift your camera, show your media card, and they don't even touch you. Here, move, you felt it.
get it? So he's just literally targeted the media. Why are they arresting journalists? So there you have a journalist in Melbourne, Australia, being arrested for doing his job.
There's a difference between being ricocheted, where you have the peripherals of getting targeted, like the police are going for someone and you get the side of, I get that, it happens, but when you feel like you've been precisely targeted, knowing that you're a working person, there's a different scenario.
It was on purpose.
I don't know.
No, I mean, look, press. It was on purpose.
There is no difference between how we get treated in the protests as the protesters. Having said that, I don't think protesters should be treated badly anyway. You know what I'm saying? But at least you're working and all of that. Why do it on purpose?
It's no accident. Look at him, clearly press, marked as press. He's got cameras on him.
Told my bosses what actually happened. It was done on purpose. But
Did they ask you if you're all right?
Of course, no. My editors are really good. My picture editors perfect. And but it's above and beyond them. You see. So in other words, it's a matter of the big bosses getting together.
Do you think that The Age is going to stand up for you here?
I have no idea.
I just can't make sense of it, where in a Western democracy, the media is not only not safe, they seem to have been targeted in that situation.
Yeah, I can't speak for exactly what the police were doing there and what was happening, but definitely you can see my face and you can see what happened. And
Somehow Victoria Police keeps confusing press with protesters. I don't know which government in the world gets away with doing that. Those governments that don't like the press showing what's happening on the front lines, China, North Korea, but this is Melbourne, Australia.
I didn't get angry at the fact that I got sprayed. I got angry that it was done on purpose. There's a difference in that, For Australia to allow the police to behave this way, to me, it's certainly not very, democratic as we think it should be.
You all right, bro? They got no respect. Even, in Hong Kong, I did this at the front line and I never copped that.
fuck. Far up, man. They pushed some old lady over.
Yeah, they smashed her. Not even media is safe in Melbourne, Australia in 2021 because apparently it's for our health. I do hope that your bosses do stand up for you and they actually...
I just hope it's not for me. I just hope
For all of us.
For all of us. They would get together and, like even this morning when they were doing the police check, the first thing I said to the police person, what you guys should have done, once you check the media, you should give us a sticker or something to show that we've been checked. Because we've been checked.
Maybe a yellow star.
But you know what I mean?
I reckon we skipped that line and we totally stuffed up the intro today.
Because
That was
what happened
that was
was last
classic.
week. Yeah, and I realize now that's getting demonetized anyways because you can't have like the pepper spraying and that on there. I don't think so. It's got to get
Really? Wow.
It's yeah. So you can't show. So it's very specific, and I think because the old lady falls wasn't really well planned out. But Benji had a really good intro video in last time, but the problem was it got demonetized because the audio and you have to submit all the thing for the music. I'm like, all right, I'll do it easy. I'll just put old videos up, and then I realized, the old videos may not be too friendly. And then I heard some sounds come from my computer, and it just bamboozled me. Welcome to the show, everyone. Hopefully, we don't fumble the rest of it.
I feel like I should take back control of the production because we're seeing now the impacts of Avi trying to run production, and it lasted for a couple of weeks and it seemed to be okay. But when it comes to really high-end technical things like having an introduction, everything's fallen apart. But yeah, thanks guys. Welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us again for another episode of the Opposition podcast.
As usual, you've all become used to how this works. Basically, comments scrolling at the bottom are on our YouTube channel. So both YouTube, mine and Rukshan's, you can get involved in the conversation and it'll feature on the screen. And of course, all the super chats, thank you in advance. We appreciate your support, and we will read out probably, we're going to read out, I'll tell you the condition. As long as your comment won't go against the community standards of YouTube and Facebook. So just if you want to say something and you mean something, sometimes you've got to say it without saying it, and we can read between the lines. Don't say it directly because we just can't risk getting nuked. On that note, let's get straight into it. How have you been, Rukshan?
Yeah, I've been good. It's another cold week in Melbourne, and enjoying. I was just watching that video of us working there on the streets, reminiscing, and now we've turned into old men working out of our studios. So
that's right.
How times have changed, but yeah, I think Melbourne, we're seeing every day descend into some type of madness, and I think today we'll be talking about some of the things that the community is talking about from things that they're seeing out in the city of Melbourne.
When I watch that back, obviously it brings back the PTSD of that period of time. Although, on the other hand, it was also kind of fun for us, or for me at least, like being out every day. It was less fun coming home and, my wife and kids were homeschooling and everyone was depressed. And, talking about how, they were very angry, let's just say, at Dan Andrews at the time. But I just look at that and I'm like, oh my God, look at that. Look at that beard and and I couldn't say Australia. I said Australia. See, that was before I learned how to say the Australia. Now I've forgotten it again. Australia. It only took me 39 years, ladies and gentlemen. But let's get straight into it tonight. The first story, there's actually a guy, I've come across him a couple of times. I don't know, maybe you know him, in which he's been creating content that's especially been doing well, I think, on Instagram. But, when I was looking for reports or something specific about the topic that we're talking about or starting off tonight on, he popped up first. Now, I just went to his, X instead, but I'll actually give him let's give him a plug. He seems all right. Hopefully I don't regret plugging some guy. So here we go. It's Two Worlds Collide podcast. And he's talking about the story we were going to talk about anyways. And I thought he had a pretty good... He actually does. I've looked at a few of his things. He has some pretty good takes. Let's have a listen.
The entire climate change scam is being sold on CO2.
Well, that wasn't what I was looking for. Jeez. Hold on. I was sure I saw the one that I'm... Yeah, this is it.
Yesterday, thousands of Shia Muslims marched through Melbourne's CBD for a religious procession that started in Treasury Gardens and ended up at Parliament House. But along the way, they stopped, they turned, and they began a religious chant or prayer right in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral, the biggest cathedral in the country. Not near it, not across the road, directly outside the church. Now, you tell me, was this just truly a part of the route, or was there something more to it? Was it a simple stop for prayer, or could it be seen by some as a show of presence, maybe even strength? From where I stood, it definitely raised a lot of questions, and I think everyday Aussies are asking the same ones. Now, let's flip the scenario. What if thousands of Christians walked past a mosque, stopped, faced it, and started worshipping? The media would lose their mind. There would be front page outrage, there would probably be arrests, and followed by protests. And every politician would be bending over backwards to apologise for it. But when the roles are reversed, there's silence. Now, let's ask some real questions. Whenever you plan a march or a large-scale public gathering in Victoria, especially in the CBD, you need government approval and permits. That approval and permit includes a detailed route map submitted in advance to authorities. So the government knew exactly where this group was going. And you can't tell me no one looked at it and said, hang on, they're stopping right in front of the biggest cathedral in the country. Maybe, just maybe, we should reroute them to avoid triggering unrest. But they didn't. And they let it happen because they're too busy playing optics and pushing DEI policies over protecting national unity. And let's be real, this is what happens when you combine mass unchecked immigration, zero cultural integration, and a government obsessed with inclusion slogans over national cohesion. You get division, you get tension, you get processions that look more like power plays than a peaceful display of faith. Are we still allowed to talk about things that make us uncomfortable? Or is that off limits now? Because let's be honest, you won't hear a single word about this from the mainstream media or any politician. And that silence, that's a part of the problem. What's your thoughts?
That's a good take to actually summarize a lot of the views that have been floating around online. I think you kind of summed up a lot of the stuff that I've seen online that people are saying about how they felt about just seeing this snippet of video. I have not seen that before. So yeah, I'll give that guy a follow as well. It's really good.
I said his name, didn't I?
I think so.
Yeah, because I've closed it already, so I can't remember. But I followed him today. He seems like he has decent takes. But like I said, I've just started, so don't hold me to it if he has some crazy stuff, because these days you never know. But from what I could see, he was pretty sensible in the take. And on that one specifically, yeah, absolutely true. Imagine it was the shoe on the other foot. Imagine it was, a big group of Christians. They'll be labelled as nationalists, trying to
stir trouble in the community.
By making a point. Yeah. And why is there that double standard? Why? Because you don't see it any other way. You don't see any other group doing that. Why is there this kind of double standard? Like, is it that nobody genuinely realised? They submitted it, because it could be they submitted it. Honestly, they could have submitted it, and whoever in council or whatever just did not even think about it. Like, that is quite possible until these videos come out, but nobody's really talking about these videos. It's just online. I haven't seen any outrage in the media, as he said. But
look, it's not going to be discussed in the media in the manner that it's being discussed in the public. Like, if you look at that as a whole event, like if that particular group got together just to go to the cathedral and do that, I think there would be some type of media coverage for it. We're interpreting it from the fact that, this is this particular video footage is just one section of a procession that took throughout the city of Melbourne, and it is a religious significance in terms of I think like mourning. It's like a remembrance, and the chest beating is a part of that. I'm not sure if they've got to face a certain direction as well when they do this. When they stop and do this. So there's lots of elements going on where I think people culturally don't understand what's happening as well. Mix into that the fact that we do have religious freedom in Australia. So, I mean, some of the comments that people are making about, assimilation and integration, it doesn't really work out in the sense of, in Australia, you can practice your religion. So you can be Jewish, you can be Muslim, you can be Hindu, you can be Buddhist. And that's the case in, almost every Western nation where you do have that freedom to practice your religion. So I don't think that is the issue that people are making out to be. But the optics, definitely, when it's taken in this context, without any type of, understanding of, if this was specifically planned to be around the cathedral and to face the cathedral and do that, then of course it's open to interpretation and how people view that. And some people have looked at it and said that this is something that's confronting. They're trying to show dominance and all these other conjecture based on the footage. That's kind of how I'm reading this. But I understand there's a broader implication to this as well.
Yeah, and look, the thing is, I guess if you want to be favourable to the crowd, to the people at that festival, at that religious thing, because you do see like that smashing on the chest, which I think is a Shia Muslim festival that they do. Every year it causes a stir wherever they are, because obviously people in the West are unfamiliar with it. So it's like any kind of, there's a million Jewish things, Hindu things, Muslim things, and heck, Christian things for when you flip it around on the other side. Like I've been to church a couple of times. I'm like, oh, that's pretty funky. I didn't know that. Like it looks interesting to me. This one I do say has kind of an intimidating element to it, especially when you see large crowds of people smashing their chest. I don't know what it means. It might be like in Judaism, there's a thing where they tap their chest like this, and that's like a sign of repentance or whatever.
Well, I'll give like a background on it. I just kind of looked it up quickly just to give a background. So because there's a few people in the comments asking what the context is then of the particular ritual. So the chest beating ritual practiced by Shia Muslims during mourning ceremonies, particularly the Islamic month of Muharram, is it's not a festival. It's a in a celebratory sense, but a solemn religious observance to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Hussein Ibn Ali, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, at the Battle of Karbala in 680 CE. Below is so it's pretty much it's pretty much like a mourning of the death of the Ali. Is the explanation for it. And you do see, like you said, you see it around the world. Like a lot of the videos that end up on X of, I guess, Muslims around the world, sometimes it's actually appears more aggressive because they're topless and the chest beating is actually even more intense. This actually looked quite tame compared to some of the videos I've seen out of parts of Montreal and other parts of the Western Europe. So it is that festival. It happens this time of the year everywhere around the world. And I think what we're seeing is, Avi, the demographics change in Australia now is kind of in your face, because as these communities, and this could be any community, this happens to be the Muslim community, which is a large segment of Australia's population now, comparatively to other immigrant communities. Once you have these big communities form and they start observing religious festivals, which they do, because they do observe, almost every single festival that they would do in the Middle East, for instance, or where they come from around the world, and these numbers come together, it does appear that it's growing and getting bigger and bigger. So people will start seeing these changes. I think, in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll have even more people participate in these festivals, and we'll have our state governments allowing for these processions to happen in public spaces. And, Melbourne, it's not the city of churches like Adelaide, but there's churches all around the city of Melbourne. So wherever
I do think though
you're gonna have these type of scenes take place, and there's always going to be now this people interpreting it in this manner. And look, I'm not saying that there aren't people within that group or large sections of that group perhaps that have a certain view, and maybe they are showing dominance in the West, and they're portraying this strength of their community and of their faith and
those that don't should be as mindful of everyone else as they want people being mindful of them. So the example that he gives, that if a crowd like this of Christians turned towards a mosque and begun some Christian ritual with big crosses or whatever, they would feel intimidated. They would not like it. They would be outraged. and it is odd to me that they either don't see it, or even worse, they purposely do it to, put that dominance forward. And
Yes.
and it's hard to know
You're
what
right.
each and every person here thinks. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of them would just be doing whatever the rest are doing. It's just the
Yes.
way it is. They probably don't even. Well, they do. Obviously, they realize it's a freaking church. It's a massive church. But many of them may just. It's like they're following the mob, so they're just going to do whatever the mob does. But I totally understand. If I was a Christian, looking at it, like if that was a synagogue, I am sure that the Jewish community would be. Especially in the current climate, and apparently in this crowd they did have people waving certain flags, including Palestinian flags. So there was like a political element to it as well. So I think it's something.
That's a difference as well between, I think, Western Christian societies and stuff. Like, I don't think if you had a Christian parade like this, they would necessarily do something like that near a mosque. Like, that is just a societal norm.
It's
just
provocative.
a societal norm. Yeah, it's a societal norm in Australia. Out of respect, we wouldn't do these things. Like, I remember, a few months ago, we had those protesters, Palestinian protesters, turn up to protest in front of mosques because of what's happening overseas. In front of synagogues in Caulfield and stuff, because of what's happening overseas. Now, generally, I don't think Christians would take religious issues overseas, a conflict or something, and make it religious in terms of protesting in front of mosques and synagogues and things like this, just because of the polite society and the way that we have our expectations in the West, that yes, you could have freedom of religion, but we respect everyone's rights when it comes to observing their religion in a peaceful manner, without being intimidated or without having, their holy places, something like this happen at one of their holy sites. So I don't necessarily think in general you'd have a group of Christians, just in general Australian society, turning up at a mosque and doing this. But whoever's organizing these type of events quite possibly either doesn't think about those ramifications of that, they don't care, or they've considered it and they're doing it anyway because it's like you said, we can do it. That's kind of the Australia, like that is kind of the Australia that we live in today, right? Where foreign-born groups or immigrant groups or foreign cultures show more dominance over, the Australian way of life, or what the expectations of living an Australian life. Whereas foreign and these foreign religions and things like this tend to dominate more because we have these freedoms. Whereas if you go overseas and you go to those countries, like, you can't even observe sometimes your religious signs and show symbols and things like this, right? There's plenty of places where you can't show tattoos, you can't have tattoos of Buddha, all these kind of things around the world. But we have so much freedom in Australia that sometimes groups that do come into Australia tend to abuse those freedoms that we have. And I think that's where the issues are now starting to appear.
And whether it's intentional or not, the long road is it will be intentional. And that's, I guess, this is like a red flag that people are noticing, especially when you look around the world and you see, what is this? When you look at this now, okay, it's a one festival, one time. There's a couple of issues that I think people have. It's, obviously the fact that they've turned towards the church and they're doing this, Shia Muslim, whatever you would call that, tradition. And it's a kind of intimidating one. So there's that element. There's also just the element of this mass event where it looks like the city's been taken over, blocked off for an Islamic an Islamic event, right? Something that's foreign to locals. And I think people are looking at that and the red flags are going, especially when you look at, if you visited somewhere like London, let's say, that's just, it started off like just an event once a year or twice a year, 3 times a year, where, they all concentrated in the city, and you got this kind of what Aussies perceive as a shocking scene. And then, fast forward a few years, well, that just becomes a standard. You land in London now, in Heathrow, and you leave the airport, it kind of looks like this. Maybe not black, but they're wearing all the different robes. It kind of looks like you're in a you know, in Islamabad, like it's like, or like a Pakistani kind of airport instead of in England, because that's what happens when the demographics change. So I think there are two elements to it. You know, what people are feeling about this particular event this time when they're seeing both these images of the church and just the general masses of the people in the city, and you know, and we just got to be able to have a conversation without, you know, an honest conversation about all the things surrounding it. And I think that they rely, especially the organisers or the community leaders, they rely on the fact that the government would be, they just will not talk about it. You won't touch it because it's offensive to even, you know, you get labelled all sorts of things if you just question it at this point. And then by the time, like in England, by the time that the government realises that in the ballot box, they need, you know, the grooming gangs is the perfect example of it. It's like for all these years it was taboo, and in fact you were, you were a fringe nutcase that they tried to jail and silence whichever way they can, just to get you to stop talking about it because they were saying you were disturbing the social cohesion. By even talking about it, the police shut it down. You know, every level of government shut it down. And then it got to, and then you fast forward again to a point where it's so out of control, and the rest of the country, which is slowly becoming the minority but still hold the majority, that they're outraged by it. They're realizing what's happening to their own country, and it's probably already too late. And then they finally start making it legal to talk about. So I think in Australia we need to learn from the lessons from overseas, and we need to have those discussions. It doesn't mean entering the discussion with blind hate. You know, I don't think that itself.
That's the mistake I think that's been made online in terms of this discussion. And you know, I kind of commented about this, and some people saying you're trying to defend it. I'm not trying to defend anything. I'm just trying to give the context of what's happening here, because it's important. There's a difference between a mob of people turning up at a cathedral directly to do this in front of the cathedral, and people walking in a procession and stopping in different places and doing this. So we can talk about that, but I'm not trying to defend anything. My point was, if you're seeing this today in Australia and you're surprised by this, then you know you're already behind the eight ball when it comes to understanding what's happening in Australia and in cities like Melbourne and states like Victoria. Because this has been building up for a long time. And I'm not talking about anything, but I'm saying the demographic shift in this country, where we're seeing more and more of this. Now, this is, we're talking about a Muslim festival. This could happen with a Hindu festival, a Sikh festival. We had that lake being renamed in the reference to a Sikh god in Berwick. So we're seeing these changes in our state and in our cities. So what that shows is, this it's not just about this one single scene here. The truth of what's going on is even more, I think, I don't want to say bad for Victoria or bad for Australia. That's not how I'm trying to say this, but there's a change happening, and we have to confront those changes, because if it goes unchecked, if it goes unchecked and we become like London, yes, then it's bad.
It's
definitely
bad.
What's happened there is what's happened there is you have these groups that have taken complete control of towns and cities, and not by force as such, but you have churches being converted into mosques and temples, which is even I think more of a bigger issue that points to the decline of in the West, in Australia, like the way that we observe religious festivals, as a Catholic or as a Christian, that has declined. So there's definitely, overwhelming majority of, I think 40% of the country is Christian in Australia. So there's Christians and Catholics, but the way that we profess our faith is not as similar as this in the West. Now, in Latin America and in, parts of Asia, you have these parades of Catholics and Christians, and you have this kind of religious elements of that society being shown. But what's happening in Australia now is the people that have come into this country, whether it's Muslims or Hindus or Buddhists, whatever it is, they are more prevalent in the societal aspect of showing dominance of their faith and religion, and they want to make that known, and they are doing it in a way that they would do it, overseas. Like this is not for fun. They're doing this as a show. It's like this is what they want, and they want more of this, and they will do more of this because they want more and more people to join into this as well. So we have to understand that. So beyond just the image of people in front of Cathedral, I think there's a massive shift happening in the country that we need to obviously be aware of and address the issues that come with that as well.
And we've seen a lot of those issues as of late. Let's read a couple of the super chats before we move on to the next story. I probably need to move that up there, don't I? What have I done, mate? What have I done? Where is it? I could just go on the other screen, but I don't even know where those comments go.
Are you trying to bring up the super chats?
Yeah, it's gone below the thing. We'll come on this, and then we can do it here. I don't know why it does it on that screen like that. There we are.
It's from Varon. Hello, Rukshan and Shalom, Avi. Hi, all in the chat. You can say shalom to me as well. I will take a shalom as well, Varon.
Ooh, that's news. Breaking news here tonight. He is officially happy with his Mossad payments. Jamal, super chat, always great. Yeah,
thanks, mate.
Appreciate it. I know our work is done when Jimal's put through his super chat. Varan got another one.
Drinks on me, Baz, and alms for the Jews. There you go. That's for Baz.
Baz? Is Baz here tonight? Oh, yeah, Baz is here.
Must be.
That's the next one. Baz,
thanks for the super chat. First, love you, lads. And 4 Aussie flags. Great to see. Thanks, Baz.
Oh, we want to know why you chose 4 Aussie flags, because I've worked out with Baz, you just got to ask a question and then the next super chat comes through. Thanks for the super chat, Baz. Got just a couple more. Oh, yeah, I like this one.
DD, thanks for the super chat. Here's my jizya.
Do you know what the jizya is?
I don't know what jizya is, but
jizya
I'm about
is
to find out.
The tax that in Islamic states that non-Muslims have to pay. So like my family in Yemen had to pay a jizya, so it's a tax.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things, and it's funny because when you get into debates about Islam and the treatment of non-Muslims by Muslims, so that's like a point of contention that always comes up, and it's funny when the mental gymnastics that they go through to try explain to you why it's actually so. Like the Islamic when I've argued this point with the Muslim preachers or whatever or influencers, and they'll say, no, actually, if you look at it, it's a tax that you need to pay for security, and you don't have to pay the other tax, and it's generally less. But then when you actually look at it all up and you look history, there's no actual number. Yeah, they'll say 2.5%, which is less than what you have to pay for the zakah as a Muslim, which is like I think it's 2%, and the zakah might be 2.5%. I'm mucking up the numbers, but they always argue. But then when you look historically at what it was, it and what it says in the actual scripture, it says like it doesn't determine a rate. It's up to the Islamic government of that time, of that place, based on whatever they want. So it's traditionally ended up like in some places as 50%, 60%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot higher, and it just came down to whether the government was friendly to non-Muslims or not. And also when you look at the scripture of where it came from, it wasn't about protection. It was about kind of suppressing, making them feel less than. If you look at the actual wording of it, it's not the way it's portrayed, and it's just like. And the thing is, that's funny because you get like Muslims in the West that will argue it, and it's like, dude, imagine just like I would just flip it on them, and go, okay, imagine we had a tax here for like non-Christians, like it's just the other way around. How
would say it's apartheid. They'd be calling it apartheid.
You'd call it everything. You call it racist. You call, but you think like somehow.
I mean, technically, we kind of have reverse, some type of reverse apartheid where we're taxed and the money's given to other people in terms of, like, let's say, for instance, indigenous organizations, for instance.
Sure.
So those things happen everywhere. But I understand what you're saying about this particular tax. It's probably if you converted, you could save money. That's probably the way that they were looking at it.
And you know what? I think that example you give is not bad. Like, because I'm against that, and we've always made that point. Like, that is not how we should be in a free society. Everyone should be equal before every citizen should be equal before the law, right?
Yep.
So, I shouldn't have to pay tax while this guy doesn't. In fact, he gets a tax. That makes no sense. But the jizya is also different. It's a tax that goes straight to the pockets of whoever's ruling, and it is like a punishment to, because they can either convert or pay that tax. So
Yeah.
I forget the actual wording, but whatever. We don't need to get into it. That's what it is. The jizya.
Thanks for the super chat. That was it. More jizya, please. We'll take it.
Yeah.
It's from Abby King. Thanks for the super chat. I don't see any women. Were women there? Look, I think traditionally in this particular observation of their religious practices, there's no women because it's done in public. So it's always been, I think, done the same way for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I don't think women participated in it in that fashion. As far as I know.
There are. It doesn't look like there's no videos of any women. I've never seen women at any of these, so I think it's a fairly safe thing to say that no women participated, at least in the public part of this.
Yeah.
But they'll still get the support of the feminists, like what's her name,
Clementine Ford.
Surprised Clementine wasn't there.
Cruel Intentions, thanks for the super chat. Good evening, ladies and perverts.
How did she know?
What else is there? This is from Pierre. Thanks for the super chat. Pierre character lifting some weight saying, keep it up.
Oh, that must be... It must be... I think what they're saying... I think that's... must be like an emoji or something because it's spelled. That's what somebody said to us. Yeah. Must be an emoji they've put through that just comes through as typed out. I've learnt that since the last person.
Yeah.
I had no idea what they were saying. Thank you for the super chat.
Ted, thanks for the super chat again. Good day, Avi and Rukshan. Baz, mate, you're a legend, brother.
Why is everyone
loving?
loving?
As long as you want to super chat and thank Baz for whatever you like, just ensure you do the super chats and go for your life.
Yeah, thanks, Baz, and thanks for everyone. Thank you, Baz, for being a legend that everyone wants to super chat about. But what is it that everyone's loving about Baz?
Yeah, let's we're gonna follow up on the chats later.
So so Kieran, this is
follow up. Hey guys, jizya is to force them to Islam. Then they make a death penalty to leave Islam. That's what I said. Usually, like when you have this type of historically, what I've seen on other parts as well, when you have these kind of taxes placed on people because of differences, like religious differences and things like this, is usually to force some type of conversion. So, your life becomes cheaper, especially if you're living in abject poverty or something like this. Are you going to pay this tax, or are you just going to convert and not pay the tax?
So here I'm just going to read Quran because I just ChatGPT'd where's it from in the Quran. It says, fight those who do not believe Allah or in the last day and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and his messenger has made unlawful and who do not adopt the religion or truth for those who were given the scripture until they give the jizya willingly while they are humbled. And then it says it in Arabic, whatever. So that's where it comes from. So when they say that it is, it's like a protection tax. That's the way that they often will sell it when you're debating this, right? And if you don't know any better, you'll go, oh, cool, it's a protection tax. But that brings its own problems. I've asked them when I do those live debates. I've gotten into it recently, and that's why I got my head into it. But they'll say to you, it's just like a tax that you pay for protection, but it's actually less than the Islamic tax, like the zakat. And I go, hold on. So it's extortion. Like your excuse is that it's like it's like a bikie gang in a shop.
Yeah,
and
exactly. It's like the tobacco wars that we're having here.
And you know what? And you know what? If you do it in your country, fine. I'm not going to tell you how to don't pretend that you're a progressive country. But don't come here and then try to convince us, because one day you would, because by their law, by Islamic law, that's where you go. Like that's what happens. And then it comes down to whoever's in charge, whatever government they have. So if it's a radical government, they'll up the jizya to 50, 60, 70% to encourage you to convert to Islam. And then, there's no way out, because the punishment for apostasy in Islam, we know, is death. But we're not getting into a whole study of it tonight. To be honest, I don't really care. Everyone can practice what they want as long as their religion's not telling them to hurt me.
Well, I mean,
Having said that, I know a lot of the time it is, and we can walk back from that and pretend like it's not, and dig our head in the sand. There is a lot. There are also, there are progressive Muslims that are trying to reform the religion, like Imam Tawhidi. He silenced the majority, the leadership. Like if you look at the Islamic Council of Victoria, they are absolute radicals. They believe in the most radical stuff that goes against everything we believe in Australia. So I think it's conversations we need to have. Doesn't mean that every practicing Muslim wants to humble us and make us pay the jizya and whatever. Probably not. Do a lot of them want to live under an Islamic state in which, like Islamic rule, in which we would have to pay the jizya? Maybe. Quite possibly. It's weird to me to think that they would, because why would you come to Australia if that's what you got away from? But, when you see big crowds like this going to the city, practicing these things out in the open in somewhere like Melbourne, Australia, facing a church, whether it's on purpose or not, it makes you go,
let's have no illusions about any of this. Make no mistake. And I'm not saying this in a negative way. I'm just saying how it is. If it ever came to it, that church would be a mosque.
Yep.
That's just the truth. That's just how it works. It's happened throughout the world. I brought up the example of Constantinople, Istanbul, the Hagia Sophia. It's now a mosque. That was one of the highlights of the Orthodox and Catholic and Christian faiths in the Eastern Roman Empire, and it's a mosque today. That's an extreme example, but history, things change, and particular religions, especially the Islamic faith, they want people to convert. They want people to come over. That's their belief in their faith. Everyone, you're a believer or you're a non-believer, and what we see in England today is, yes, they do buy up old churches and then convert it into mosques. Hindu groups have done this as well with conversions into temples. So this happens throughout the world, but there are certain faiths that if they could. And again, I'm not saying this in a negative manner. It's just the reality of it. Every church, every religious institution in this country, everywhere, would be Islamic. And, the cathedral, nothing's off limits. What we saw on that video, is it that? I don't think so in that sense. That is a sign of how much Victoria, Melbourne, Australia is now changing. And what you're looking at today, in 5, 10, 15 years from now, that group of people that are marching around will be like 10 times bigger.
Yep.
And those displays will be 10 times bigger, and it will be in your face. And this is, as it is now, whatever people make about mass immigration, all these kind of things, it's not really changing under Labor. It's not changing in Victoria. We'll get to that later on in the show as well, with how things are going. This is the reality, guys. This is what it is. And yes, I think a lot of white Australians potentially will be shocked maybe when they see these scenes becoming more and more like this. I'm not necessarily shocked by it, because I see it in other parts of the world and in Asia. It's happened for a long time. Avi, you're probably the same. You come from that part of the world where you've seen these progressive changes in the last,
mind you, where I don't think in Israel.
No, I'm not in Israel, but I'm saying the changes.
No, because in Israel they're Sunni. I don't think there's really much.
No, not that particular festival. But I'm just saying countries. You're from, for instance, your family's from Yemen. There's no longer Jews in Yemen.
No.
So these changes happen. I'm not saying, again, I'm not trying to fearmonger or anything like this, but Australia as a country, and it's not just Muslims, it's Hindus, it's everyone else that's coming as well. Australia as a country is rapidly changing, and these other religious groups are just more dominant in the natural sense of showing their devotion to their religious ideas. and it is going to come to a clash point where it's in your face. And I don't know how that's. I don't know how that's dealt with as a society. I don't know. I think we should be dealing with it definitely. There should be boundaries. There should be expectations about what it means to live in Western culture, and the expectations of living in society where everyone's free to practice their religion without offending other people, for instance. But of course, I think the core tenet has to be these are Western nations, Christian nations, and that is the predominant way of life and practice that we have in this country of Australia. So we don't need to have these discussions that they're having in the UK, Avi, where they're talking about introducing Sharia courts, or they already have these institutions already working in the background within these communities. Like, we do not want to do that in Australia, but I fear that it is going to get to that point as well. And this is just the appetizer of what's to come with the entree and the main course.
A correction: there are definitely Sharia courts here already. That's not even
no. I'm saying they are, but it's not in the manner where it's clashed with Australian society as such.
Yeah. And they're not. I don't think they have government. I think in the UK they're actually recognised at this point, because once local governments are taken over, things operate within those local councils, and then it spreads slowly but surely. And yes, it happens within all communities. But I guess personally, as a Jew, the Hindus scare me a lot less than something like this. Whether it's Shia or Sunni, they both don't, too much of their focus, even at this religious event, is about us. So, as a Jew, now, as Australians, I know that this specifically here, just looking online, there are a lot of Australians that are alarmed by it, and I can understand why. I can understand more than anyone, because I'm alarmed by it as an Australian Jew, for the double whammy that I get from the potential of demographic change and the threat that comes with it for me and my community in particular. Let's read these last super chats before we move on to the next one. I think I moved it. There we go. I did it.
Perfect. Andrew, thanks for the super chat. This is pure intimidation. And I saw another comment. Someone said similar to that, like Rukshan is talking like the takeover is already done. I hate to say it.
I think it is.
This is what you're seeing today is what's the impact of the last 20 years, for instance. And now it's like accelerating at a rapid pace. So takeover in the sense that, not that we can't control the future of this country, but it is so ingrained now. You're seeing the inability of governments to act on even just violence in our street. We discussed this last week when it came to violence at restaurants and burning synagogues and things. We have police and governments in this country right now that are terrified of acting on issues around social cohesion, which is actually things that they can solve by arresting people and putting the full force of the law of this country to effect. But they will not do that because they're afraid of offending people, and they don't want to get into this kind of real world discussions about the serious breakdowns in social cohesion we're having because of religious extremism in many instances. The hatred of Jewish people in Australia that we're seeing comes from this religious hatred that has been there for thousands of years, that has come and seeped into Australian society now, and the governments here are terrified to tackle it. So if they're terrified to tackle that, the scenes you're seeing in front of the cathedral and stuff, however you want to interpret that, no government in this country, Labor or Liberal, the main governments that are in control of things, they're not going to do anything about this. In fact, if we talk about this too much, you know what they'll do? Next year, Jacinta Allen will be marching with them. This is the kind of things progressive societies that the West has become. Like, you want to point these things out, they will double down and say,
I can't wait to see that, because there's no women.
Well, that'll happen. Well, no women in the crowd. She might have to.
Although she's a progressive, you never know. Next year she could be a man. The question is, will they accept this?
You know the point.
100%, you're right.
She might send her husband in place, right? That's what she'll do. Like, I'm just saying, this is kind of how the West reacts to these situations. And it only gets worse from here when you capitulate and you don't say that this is, a Western country, a Christian country. These are our bedrock foundations. This is who we are as Australians. Yes, you can have your religious practices and you can practice your faith, but no, you can't walk around our churches, face towards them. And yes, it might be a prayer of mourning, whatever it is, but
pick a better spot. Pick a better spot.
It's going to impact social cohesion in our country. that stuff is not on in our society. And it's not about impeding on your rights as a Muslim to practice your faith. No, it's about respecting the multitudes of other people in this country that worship different gods or don't worship gods at all. So I think that's got to be made clear, for instance. But, I'm asking for too much because I don't think we have the leadership capable in this country right now that are up to the task of talking about these kind of hard conversations that we're having. And of course, many Australians are having online.
The internet's having it. And I think we should have it. Again, you can have it respectfully. You don't have to, and I think, and this is coming from me, somebody that used to come in, all guns blazing on this particular subject. But I've realized that the conversation can be had because there are rational people, even from the Islamic community, who recognize what they left and what we're becoming. It's just like talking to Indians. You know how many Indians tell me they don't want too many Indians here because they don't want the demographic turning into India here either. Like, you get that. So you can have the conversation from, if you're having it from a good faith place where you're saying, look, I love, or I'm less so today. It's a bit scary to see what would become for many of the reasons we're discussing tonight. But I love what Australia stood for, at least, and the idea that we had multi-ethnic people who brought beautiful food and culture in, but not when this city is suddenly taken over by foreign kind of aggressive looking men. Even if it is a harmless thing, it's just not the vibe that many Australians who were born and bred here ever envisioned their city looking like. It's just not what people want. Let's read these last couple of. Oh, I've got a few now, so read the super chats and then we'll move on.
Let's go. Thanks, Cruel Intentions. Baz is easy to spell. There you go. That's why Baz is getting super chats. That's good. Keep them coming.
Okay, I'll come up with a whole list of easy names.
Varun, paying the Baz. We should make it a common thing. Everyone that does a super chat, if you want to do a super chat, you got to pay the Baz jizya first.
The Baz jizya. We should call it the jizya. Yeah. Baz has jumped
Baz
in.
Dark Horse. Thanks. True Blue Australian Cobbler. Thanks, mate. 100%.
Baz paid less jizya than everyone. Maybe that's because Baz is actually the Muslim and paying the zakat and not the jizya.
Catherine, thanks for the super chat, Catherine. Always joining in on the show. Protection money like the mob. No thanks.
That's the way I view it. But that's why I live in Australia, where I never want that. But at the end of the day, that's where you end up if you don't.
Bands would banned it. The empire and its pawns are falling all around. That could be in reference to many different things, but yeah, many empires or things that we have known to be stable are definitely falling apart around us. Jay Good, thanks for the super chat. I served in the army and had a big chat with my former boss, who has fought with the idea for a few years. And if I wasn't worried about what's happening, I sure as hell am now. I'm not sure the exact context of that, Avi, but
I'm assuming Jay's talking about the general breakdown of social cohesion in Australia at the moment and around the world, and the pure hate that you're seeing. And if you know anything about history, it tends to boil over like that before things turn horribly dark. But hopefully, who knows? I am particularly worried at the moment about the direction of the world and indeed Australia. But we'll just keep having these conversations and hopefully we all get through it together.
Definitely.
And we got Abby, last one.
Abby, thanks for the super chat again. As a Christian, I find it disappointing that churches are so complacent and unwilling to stand up against Islam and their evil practices. Start calling it out for what it is, evil. Well, this is the thing, right? So I went to some of these, I go to these big cathedrals, and sometimes they do hold like certain masses and stuff. And, there is an element of woke within the church. Now, it's undeniably woke because I do see sometimes services that are held by other denominations where perhaps the priest or whatever is not as woke, and it's more to scripture. It's more to just normal fundamental values and traditions which are a part of the religious text, for instance. But I have been to some of these churches, and there is a lot of woke stuff that goes in Navi. Like I went to a service around Christmas time. They were talking about LGBTQ. They were talking about the rights of refugees. And I know that can relate to Christianity and stuff. Fair enough. They're talking about climate change.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that we view this through the lens of people who commentate on politics, but within the church system as well, the church is very open to these type of ideas. Like in terms of some of the signs that the church holds up and the things that they get involved in terms of activism, they promote some of these things like mass immigration.
Is that all churches, or is it more?
It's not all churches, but it's more towards like some of the. Personally, from what I've seen, like Anglican, sometimes Catholic, depending. I mean, the previous Pope, and I'm saying this as a Catholic. The previous Pope that we had was slightly woke on certain issues, in terms of politicizing things. So that kind of spills over into these progressive countries like Australia and Canada and the US, where they'll use the church as a weapon as well in terms of getting through progressive ideas. And we see that. We see that happening a lot now in Asia and parts of Latin America. It's not like that yet. Not that from what I can see, it's more kind of done in the more traditional sense, even in parts of Europe like Italy or the Balkans and things like this, when it comes to observing their faith, especially the Orthodox faith, very strict, and they don't get involved in this political stuff and this LGBTQ and the rights of immigrants and all these kind of things. And again, I'm not saying church shouldn't be involved in these discussions, but some of what we're seeing around mass immigration is being promoted around by the church.
Yeah, and look, I think you could say the same thing. Well, synagogues is different. Synagogues, I guess, if you go to liberal, so you don't have. That's the thing. Like mosques, you don't have really liberal mosques. Like most people, they go to like mosques are ultra religious by nature. I don't know if there is a concept of a liberal mosque. But there are liberal synagogues, which are like lefty synagogues. I think since October 7, most people in the Jewish community have realised that, all right, all this woke stuff might not be... I'm talking about the bulk of those who would have subscribed to some of the lefty stuff, and the synagogues themselves that subscribe to them. I don't know. I haven't seen... I guess maybe they've been preoccupied. But... The general like actual main synagogues and that just never get involved in the woke stuff, because a lot of the woke stuff goes against the religion, really. Like the gay marriage debate, I don't understand. So like the synagogues that did get behind it would be synagogues that considered liberal, and the wider Jewish community probably don't view them as real synagogues, so they're breaking the laws of the religion. Like they're the ones that'll have female rabbis or whatever. So to them, it's not real. It's just playing. They tend to be quite like those Anglican churches. Well, there's that one Anglican church in Godford. Was that in New South Wales? Who always made his sign. I haven't seen him in a while actually. Every time he changed his sign for the plebiscite for vote yes.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Do you remember which one I'm talking about? He was an Anglican church, changed it every time. Yeah. Somebody in the comments might know who I'm talking about. But you don't see that. You see that only in really lefty synagogues. But the thing that you notice is like you don't see that happening in mosques or. Even, I don't know, the Hindu ones get involved in that stuff. They would be super traditional.
Nah, it's very, very traditional. Like even to the extent of, we're talking about things like
Gosford. Yeah, somebody in the comments said Gosford. Yeah. That's right.
I do weddings for a living, and I see even interfaith marriages sometimes between like Muslims and Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs, and it's very kind of tense. And you even have religious institutions in Australia where they will not allow those marriages to take place within their, like a church would like kind of have to or whatever, right? Or these other places would have to do it. But there's, these religious places will say, nah, we're not doing that. That's not, that goes against just based on faith. Based on the fact that someone's a different faith. Like that's the problem. It's
But
not
like
about
gay marriage,
conversion or
like
anything.
gay marriage,
Yeah,
it's
the
like
gay marriage would
you
not
got to.
happen.
Yeah, it won't
No.
happen. I don't
No.
know if the church is going to end up going that way somewhere at
Mm.
some point, but I cannot see a time where the average, real accepted mainstream synagogue is ever going to do that. Mosques, definitely not. The only ones that might do it are these woke kind of churches, but even they're not doing it yet.
Yeah, not yet, but like we're getting to that point because we're seeing in America, like I've seen those videos of the priests or the pastors, they're wearing like the rainbow colors and they're kind of getting.
But that
getting
you
all
also,
to it.
but that you have synagogues as well. But like I said, they're not accepted by the majority.
Mainstream.
As in-
Yeah,
they're
of
not
course.
mainstream. They are
Yeah.
the fringe. They're like the Jewish organizations that ABC loves to bring up as like spokespeople for the Jewish community when they speak for like a tiny minority, but they just happen to say what the ABC wants to hear. Funny enough, they don't find the same when they're looking for the Muslim community to have somebody speak. They don't find some other, far lefty Muslim. They just happen to do that with the Jewish community because there is a very big progressive element there there is a very strong progressive.
I get you. I just one of the comments, Avi, I'll just touch on that because I just read the comments as they go. Someone was talking about like let's forget about all religions and obviously focus on the fact that Australia is a very secular country.
Yep.
And that's all true, but the foundation is the way that we live our life. When we talk about Judeo-Christian values, like the things that we see as good and right or moral and our morals, our ethics, all those things which are born from history, thousands of years of Western history that have also been infused now within our Australian culture and what the Australian identity is to a large extent. Those things need to be separate from I believe anyway from foreign influence to the extent that it clashes with what's good for Australian society. And I think that's where the gray area is now because more and more we're seeing like look at Australia Day, right? So much trouble in this country when we talk about Australia Day as an example, and I'm not deviating, but governments don't want to talk about it. Companies don't want to touch it sometimes. But then you look at like Hindu festival or Diwali or Eid, things like this. Woolworths, Coles love it. They jump on the bandwagon. They change everything in the shops. All the leaders, happy Diwali. They'll write these like long love letters to the Indian Australians and Eid, to the Muslim Australians. There'll be these long letters from the Prime Minister and these videos. So they use other people's cultures and religions and things like this to push their certain views and agenda to get those people involved in supporting them as well. But they will do that at the expense of the Australian identity, of Christian values and Christian identity and things like this. So we're seeing that more and more in countries like Australia, and you don't see that overseas. You do not see that overseas. Even in Sri Lanka, there's Muslims, there's Buddhists, there's Christians, there's Hindus. For instance, I was there recently, but it is a Buddhist. Foundationally, it is a Buddhist country. So that is the predominant, system that is kind of observed there by everyone. Even if you are a, Catholic or a Christian, you respect that foundational value of the nation. But you're free to practice whatever you want to practice. But there is an understanding, and I think that line is being blurred in Australia, where it's like, hey, we're everything and we're everything and nothing at the same time.
Well, if you're everything, you end up being nothing. That's essentially what happens. All right, we talk too much. We get the super chats. Let's go. Read through it.
Yeah, Big Cheese. Thanks for super chat. Proud of my Jewish convict heritage, Avi. I encourage you to read the New Testament. The answers to all problems in the world are in there. You should read the New Testament. I think you said you haven't read the New Testament.
I haven't.
Last time on the last show.
I haven't. I would read it. I don't have a problem reading it. I would read it, but my rabbi's going to get me in trouble. No, they won't. They probably read it too. This is Jay. Jay's clarified for you.
Yeah, Jay, thanks for the speech again. Yeah, breakdown of social cohesion and especially the hate towards the Jewish people.
Appreciate it, Jay. Here we go.
Catherine, I mustn't have paid my climate. Jeez, it's burr.
Good on you. Thanks for the super chats.
We have Ernestine Grace. Thanks for the super chat. As a Messianic Gentile, I wish that Jewish and Christian community would stand together. After all, we have both following Adonai and both believers in freedom.
I think that the majority do I sense that there's a loud minority fringe, especially on the internet, the Christ is King kind of gang that have taken this completely different approach. I do find that many, like the average Christian that I meet out and about, who know who I am or whatever, when I meet them, they are super sympathetic. They're super supportive. They're less afraid to be pro you than probably half the Jewish community. I guess they probably haven't felt the wrath of the hate, but look, I think 100% we are natural allies in what is to come in Australia, and those who don't realise it yet, hopefully they realise before it is absolutely too late. Like, I think in a way that ship sailed. We're at a time where you're going to see these mass things that people are getting outraged about, but we're still at a point where if there was major political will, we can stop it from reaching a point like the UK and parts of Europe where it is out of hand. Like there are certain areas I just won't go to in certain states, cities. You just don't go to, right? We have a chance to stop that. The problem that we face now is that the Labor Party has complete control and they're not going to lose it for a very long time. And I fear that, the kind of political strength that we need and leadership that we need at this particular present time in order to stop it from getting completely out of hand with no way of return, is not going to happen under a Labor government. So I think if you look at it from that way, we are doomed. And
yeah, exactly. I think regardless of the sentiments online, like you said, Avi, it's going to take leadership and political will for that to change. And we've seen that in the US with Trump. Things like saying Merry Christmas were a problem, right? And it's crazy. And they're really forceful about asserting the values of that nation, like the Trump administration, regardless of anything else you might think, in terms of asserting, the place of God in the US and the prominence of God within different things that they do in the country. Trump is very clear about that. Now in Australia, we don't really have that. I haven't heard really any leaders. Scott Morrison, yes, went to church and did all these things, but when it comes to kind of publicly speaking, they're very afraid to bring up their faith or their religion or the foundational values of this country. So I think we don't have leaders like that, and you need these people to inspire the rest of the population to believe in themselves, that this is who we are. And I don't think Australia has that anymore. People know who they are. There's Australians, I see them online. They know who they are. They know their identity, and they forcefully defend their identity and their values. But I don't think they have that person that's leading them, that can get that message out to the masses. It's just not there. And unfortunately, again, I don't see it happening for a long time, maybe never. It's sad to say, but that's kind of where we're headed. Andrew, thanks for the super chat. Islam in the West has always been about takeover and domination. Just look at Britain.
I don't think this is a controversial view. It's not about the West. No. I think Islam in itself is like...
we said that before.
It wants a worldwide caliphate. Any practicing real Muslim will tell you that. It's not a secret. I think the people who don't believe that are just either ignorant or naive. And there are different ways in which they achieve that. Like if you look historically around the world, like look at the Middle East. Much of the Middle East was Christian. You look at Lebanon, it was Christian. You look at Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. That was even in 48 before the state of Israel. Before it was recognized in 48, I think it was like 80%, a bit like Lebanon, 80% Christian, 20%. Now it's flipped. It's like, I think it's 11% Christian or something like that. I'm going off the top of my head, so memory. And that's happened everywhere in the Middle East. Some through just violence, other parts where Christians just fled. So you had forced conversions, you had fleeing, you had murder, And then you just had also integrate like when it becomes the dominant force and the intermarriage, and then it just kind of that's what ends up happening. And I feel like in Australia that's kind of and in Europe that's like what you're seeing. You're seeing like in Europe, I think it's also the illegal sort of invasion of men on boats coming, and by the hundreds of thousands over the years. So you have that element. We don't have that now here, but we do have the legal migration, which is changing the demographic, which over time, that will become dominant. You remember, like the average Muslim family, how many kids are they having compared to the average Aussie family in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, look, at least three or four kids.
And so I like. To me, when I look at this conversation, I say, if we're going to bring in this, if we're going to keep that up on one side, what do you have to counter it to stop it from one day, even if it's 50 or 100 years from now, Australia by demographic shift becoming an Islamic state? How do you stop that? Well, you've got to have something else coming in. So it's either you're having lots of babies, go and have heaps of babies, or if that's unrealistic, which it is at this point, then you've got to counter it with, so at least you've got to push the government to bring in other forms of migration. So whether it's the Hindus or whatever, and you may not like that as a solution, but it may be our only kind of solution at a time where the government is hell-bent on bringing in more people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I, like you said, I don't think this has got to be controversial when we're discussing these things. This might be controversial take, but this is the easiest conquest for the Islamic faith. Yeah. The conquest of the West is the easiest. It's the easiest. You walk in.
Zero resistance.
Zero resistance. Everyone, is kumbaya. They don't understand what's going on. People that have seen what's happened in parts of the other world, like I see it in Asia. You know what it is. And again, it's not bad. It is what it is. Like this conquest happens, this takeover happens, and it used to happen by the sword. And today it's happening in a different way. And you can't blame this because it's their faith. It's what they believe in. It's what they want to do.
And not necessarily it didn't always happen by the sword. And I think even if you look at the life of Muhammad, it was kind of like that. Like they go in, it's political, and then when they had the numbers, it was by the sword. But if you want to know that experience, just talk to any Christian Middle Eastern. Like I bump into Middle Easterners all the time, like Iraqi Christians or whatever Christian from Syria, from Lebanon, Egyptian, like all those Christian groups in the Middle East who have experienced at different stages the dominance and the takeover. They tell you the reality of it, and it happens. Right now we're at the early stages where it's just it's by migration because we want to do the right thing as a country, because there are people who are trying to be virtuous at the top who are saying no, we need to, without thinking about the ramifications. And like you said, it's about the ramifications of demographic change altogether. So we need to be able to discuss all of it and any of it. But there can't be any taboo parts of it, and that's the problem that we're having. Is that as soon as you do discuss, even in this conversation now, like we've got to be really mindful about the way we approach it, so that we don't get kicked off a platform, which is crazy because like I've got zero hate in my heart for anyone. The only thing I want is to protect Australia, that we don't go down a road in which my only option as an Australian Jew is to flee and take my family out of here. Like that's not what I want to see the future of Australia. But being completely honest with you, looking down the barrel of this camera, is like that is actually where I see me in 10 years, having to flee, because it's getting that bad. And right now it's getting that bad for Jews. I think white Aussie Christians that are alarmed by those scenes that they saw over the weekend, they're only going to catch up once when they start to feel the heat of the bad migration. And where are they going to go? And we've talked about that before, but
of course, yeah.
All right, let's we keep getting these super chats. We're never gonna get to the
Insolent.
next stories.
That's all right. Thanks to Super Chat Insolent. There is well-spoken, based family man somewhere in Australia, and we need him to stand up and lead. There definitely is leaders, but I think the Australian system, the political system, the two-party system, and the way that it's all structured, it makes it very hard for these based individuals to end up in positions of leadership. Like, they are cut down very early on. You do have a few based individuals, even in the Liberal Party right now, who might find it hard to end up in a leadership position.
I think too many of the people that come up as based are trying too hard to be based. Then they're not really based. It's just like,
it's just not who they are.
Yeah, they're just like, it's about clout. There are a few in the Liberal Party that are decent, like Alex Antic. I think he's just like a genuinely based guy. Who else are you thinking in the Liberal Party that you were thinking of?
Antic's a great example. He's someone that should, people would say should be in a leadership position. I think a lot of people call for him to be in a leadership position, but the structure of that party is like, it works against individuals like him. Like, that's just kind of how it's become right now. I think the last time they had someone even close to that is maybe Tony Abbott. I know people have mixed views on him. But he's more based now afterwards.
But that's the problem of our system. The problem of our system in general is that when these kind of, because Tony Abbott had great politics before he got in, and he had even better politics. But I think it's probably similar after he got out. And what happened in the period that he actually was in a position of power is he was so shit scared of his own shadow because he didn't want to get knifed in the back by the party, because that's what keeps happening in Australia. So it's the problem is partly the system. It's not just the people. It's all good and well to have some great based great communicator to get up there, but if the party system has been infiltrated by Labor light, progressives, liberal in name only, lino, is that what we're calling?
Labor light.
Labor light. Then they're never going to succeed because they're always going to be cut down. Blade's given the paying the Baz tax.
The Baz tax.
I think Baz is going to send us an invoice at the end of tonight for a percentage of the jizya taxes that we've got. Speaking of Baz, taxes that woke in the church made me convert from Anglicanism to Orthodoxy. So it's good for something. I mean, perhaps a lot of people have done that. That's interesting.
I've seen a lot of people
going from Anglican to Orthodox. That's completely different.
It's a bit different, and I've also seen the other where a lot of people are going to these kind of new churches, these evangelical type churches.
I like those. I like those. If I was a Christian, I'd go there.
I've been to a couple with friends and stuff, and the message that's shared there is very much rooted in Scripture, and it kind of doesn't go and touch on any of those. In fact, it admonishes those kind of topics, that the woke stuff, and
Brian Tamaki and
did you? Well, Brian,
you were there. Yeah, you came to New Zealand. Did you ever see you were when you came with me? He wasn't doing it. Oh no, did he? Were you there for the big event?
No, I wasn't there for the big event, but I saw him praying over people and things like this. So
it's
in the same manner.
I not out of a religious perspective, just out of sheer. If I was going to ever become a Christian, I'm joining the evangelicals. They have the most fun at church.
Yeah, or the born again. I mean, there's different terms and different variations of it, and there is a much younger crowd, and it's a much more, again, it discusses the woke stuff in society, but not in a way where it's about.
He goes hard.
It's not about accepting those things.
No,
a lot of it's to do with forgiveness and things like this. Obviously, we're getting on a tangent, but there is that shift happening as well. The traditional churches, for whatever reason, in countries like Australia, have gone, have become enforcers of government woke in some instances. Signing, thanks to the super chat. No woman isn't in that group at the church, and meanwhile LNP arguing over gender quotas. Lord save us. That's a good observation.
That is true. Thanks for the super chat. Jimmel doesn't usually write anything, but Jimmel has written.
Even for Baz.
Jimmel usually just puts the money through, lets us know that they're supporting us, but no. Baz, you've gotten Jimmel to speak. God bless.
Yeah, well done. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. Praise the Lord.
Jay Good, thanks for the super chat. You just need to read about the Crusades. You just need to understand the history there. And once you see what Islam accomplished then, and you'll see the parallels in today. And that's a great point, because the history of the Crusades, like it talks about, it feels like the portrayal of the Crusades today is like white people went to like beat up Middle Easterners. Like that's kind of how it's portrayed. But a lot of the Crusades were about protecting Christian kingdoms and Christian lands from being overtaken, in parts of Europe, for instance. So there's a very complex, rich Christian, Catholic, whatever you want to say, history there that is misrepresented today, because it's kind of looped in with like colonialism and all these kind of evil sentiments that we have towards white people, when really the Crusades were more than that, is what I'm trying to say. It feels like it was a defense of Christianity in most instances.
Thank you for the super chat, Jay. And just Abby, last one, and we'll move on to the next story.
Thanks, Abby. She's got a quote from the Bible, Ephesians 6:11-13. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. It's a great verse. Thank you, Abby.
Do you know that verse, or you just...
No, I don't. I mean, I've heard that before. I don't know it off by heart, no.
You don't know much by heart from you're a fake Christian. You know what I used to do in the army? Because I came from really ultra-Orthodox sect. Upbringing. And so, like, I know a bunch of stuff by heart, just like really like there's a book that's Tanya, so it's like only ultra orthodox. It's mystical, whatever you call it. I don't know. But so because I got paid when I was a teenager, young, like 12, to learn, because that's like part of it. They want you to learn it by heart, learn things by heart.
Yeah.
So I used to get paid to do it, and then when I was in the army, I was, they didn't. No one would have ever imagined that I came from the ultra-Orthodox sect. And so that particular sect also goes around and tries to, get you to put the tefillin on, or get you to, on Jewish holidays, on Sukkot, they come and shake the lulav, like to do all these little customs, I guess if we had the banging one like they did in that, they would probably come and get you to bang as well.
Yeah.
And in the army, they also, they love to have a drink, and they would come around to the bases, and they would so they would have, like, you'd do whatever the custom is, and then you'd be able to have like a glass of a little shot of vodka, right?
Yeah.
So I would line up like 5 times, just so I kept doing the custom zone. But that wasn't. But then I would just like suddenly start reciting by heart, these chapters of like their most sacred thing, with the accent that they learn it as, and they just look at me like, what? Where did you come out of?
It's kind of like a superpower, depending on how you use it. And on that note, I wanted to say I watched just recently finished watching a series on Prime, The House of David. That's very good. I know it might not be historically accurate, but it's a good series. It's about the story of David.
The story of David. Oh,
yeah, story of David. It's on Prime, so The House of David.
Is it well done?
Very well produced, I thought, for a show of that nature, and it's similar to The Chosen that you can watch as well online.
Is it entertaining? Yeah, I watched The Chosen. I think I watched The Chosen.
Yeah. No, David, the House of David is entertaining show enough. Look, I don't know about the full historical accuracy of it. Obviously, they've taken liberties with that stuff, but it was I think it was well done, definitely.
I am going to go. We're always looking for a show.
He reminded me of you, because he just breaks out into song, randomly singing.
But I always do that. Like even at the protests, I used to stand there when the cops were like getting ready for war, and then I would just break out with some like really religious Jewish song.
Exactly, that's what he does. So I mean, obviously that's part of his story.
Okay, so quick. This wasn't actually on my list, but I saw this right before we came on live, because I just saw. So this is one of the people that have been identified. One of the loony lefties that have been identified from the. I think she's part of the socialists or whatever. And so she's been named, right? So this is obviously Friday night at that Jewish restaurant in Hardware Lane, Miznon, where they just thought it's a great idea to mob it and target the diners and the shop. And it turns out, because she was she one of the ones that got arrested? But it sounds like the cops let her walk at the time. Because I was basing off what somebody else wrote. But the thing that I found interesting about her is, was it her sister? I think her sister also was there.
Okay.
Because I just remember her name from the other. Anyways, the point is, she was also a midwife that dodged manslaughter charges like in 2020. Because,
Really?
Yeah. Because so she was up for manslaughter. Because her and another, so basically, the patient ended up, the young mum ended up dying after giving birth in a home birth that she was like there was two midwives, her and another midwife, because they didn't believe in like basic stuff. Apparently, that's what the mother was saying. And so essentially they weren't, one of the things that I saw is they weren't even taking her blood pressure and that, so they had no idea until she passed out. All I'm saying is clearly a complete lunatic who has found a new mission in life after being a midwife, is to join the nutters on the streets.
I've seen a lot of people in that, kind of nursing or those backgrounds ending up at these protests.
Yeah, what would have been interesting to me is where she would have sat during the COVID period, because now I think she's actually on the social, what are they called? The Victorian Socialists or whatever, one of those groups.
Yep.
And it's like those were the same group. So it sounds like she's all about, freedom of choice. I don't believe in any medical intervention, whatever. And those guys, remember, they were campaigning for the lockdowns
Vaccine.
and for the masks and for the vaccines and everything. So
Yeah.
anyway, she's a lunatic, and I doubt she's going to be consistent. So probably, I guess, because she's part of the socialists now, I imagine she was probably part of the socialists then. But interesting, she just seems to get off on a lot, and she, as I wrote there, I wouldn't trust her to babysit my pot plant. Okay. Next thing making news is ABC could be stripped of public funding as a result of key recommendation by the anti-Semitism envoy Gillian Siegel. Should we just quickly watch this?
Yeah, let's watch it.
The report recommendations.
Hold on, let's go.
Let's take you to Sydney now.
Yeah.
Anthony Albanese is speaking live.
Tony Burke and also Gillian Siegel, the special envoy to myself, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is an evil scourge, and there is no place in Australia for anti-Semitism. The kind of hatred and violence that we've seen on our streets recently is despicable, and it won't be tolerated, and I want those responsible to face the full force of the law. My government has taken a series of actions to crack down on anti-Semitism. And one of the things that we did last year, a year ago, it was to appoint Gillian Siegel as a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. And can I thank Gillian very much for, one, taking on the position, and secondly, for the extraordinary work that she has done. And today I'm joining with Gillian to launch her plan to further combat anti-Semitism. And I welcome this report, and I thank her for the work that she has done. Gillian has put a lot of work into this report, which finds that anti-Semitism has risen to deeply troubling levels in Australia in the wake of the conflict in the Middle East. But it also, of course, reaffirms the fact that anti-Semitism didn't begin on October 7. And therefore, it isn't like 2 weeks extra paid parental leave, where you pass a piece of legislation and it's done. It comes in on July 1. This is something that government needs to work with civil society on at all levels, and each and every day and every week and every month and every year, to make sure that anti-Semitism is pushed to the margins, to the fringes of extremism where it doesn't belong. We'd like it to disappear altogether. We'll now carefully consider the report recommendations. There's a number of things in here that we are doing. There's a number of things can be implemented quickly. There are a number of things that will require work over a period of time. Part of the recommendations is that we will receive an annual report, and part of that will be an assessment of progress on these issues as well. But I want to thank Gillian, and I want to thank the many members of the community, both the Jewish community and outside as well, who've worked really constructively on this report. And I'd ask Gillian to make some comments. We'll then hear from Minister Burke, and then we'll be happy to take questions on this or other things.
I'll see if there's...
Let's take you to Sydney now. Anthony.
There's supposed to be some of the details.
Okay. I mean, that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. Look, it's, again, like this kind of bureaucrat that's been put there to come up with these things. This kind of reminds me of the
days of deals. Dropping daily. Save 80 on the power.
Reminds me of the e-safety, Karen, and the things that Albanese is saying, like you don't need a report to see what's happening in front of you.
Exactly, and that's the thing that
so much time by the Australian government, state and federal, has been wasted on this issue in the sense that they could have tackled it, they could have dealt with it, but because they refused to do what's necessary multiple times for now years now, we've ended up in these processes where we now have these bureaucrats, making reports that the government will now consider. A few weeks from now, there'll be something else will happen. He'll make the same speech. They'll come up with some other task force. It's a complete waste of time. Like, there's already ways that the government, the police force, ASIO, federal authorities could deal with a lot of this, but they don't want to. They want to make it into this kind of philosophical debate about where we are as Australians and where antisemitism comes from. It's always existed. He's like kind of trying to say that we're not responsible for anything that's happened right now.
Yeah.
This report's found that it's always been there. We're just dealing with it because of, come on. Really? There's so many other things happening, issues that are important to Australians that we would want these people to focus on. But because they can't directly tackle this problem the way that it should be, we're ending up in this loop where it's just complete cluster F word. And it's not the end of it. It's got to be more and more of this.
Okay, so it's interesting the angle, because in particular because I was looking a little bit into it before we came on. Some of it seems alright, some of it seems concerning, some of it a lot of it seems like just more nothing that they're going to actually do. It's just he just wanted to be able to get in front of the camera and say we're going to implement this report. We'll see what parts, but the part that Sky News seems to be focusing on is the fact that ABC under it could be stripped. So it says here, ABC could be stripped of public funding if Albanese government implements key recommendation of anti-Semitism by Envoy Gillian Segal. I guarantee they're not going to. That's the thing here. Like, you could read it in a way that makes you happy. Ms. Segal handed down a major report on Thursday, just 1 year after the well-known business executive was appointed as a special envoy. The report outlines a series of measures needed in order to combat anti-Semitism, which it claimed had reached a tipping point that threatens social harmony, undermines trust in institutions, and marginalises Jewish Australian citizens. Among the key recommendations are for federal government to ensure cultural institutions, including public broadcasters, are not to support or implicitly endorse anti-Semitic themes or narratives. Culture shapes perception. Publicly funded institutions like arts festivals, galleries, and public broadcasters must uphold anti-discrimination values and be accountable for the narratives they promote, the report states. To ensure this does not occur, the anti-Semitism envoy called on the federal government to draft funding agreements and enabling legislation to ensure that public funding can be readily terminated when organisations or individuals engage in or facilitate anti-Semitism. Include terms in all public funding agreements with cultural institutions or festivals to allow for the effective termination of funding where the institution or festival promotes, facilitates, or does not deal effectively with hate or anti-Semitism. The recommendation states, if implemented, the recommendation could be used to strip public funding from the ABC, which has come under fire over its coverage of the growth of anti-Semitism and Israel's conflict with Hamas since October 7 terrorist attacks. So I think that's like a very wishful thinking. So they're basically reading. So this is a cutout from. Can you see that? I'll just make it a bit bigger.
Zoom in a little bit. Yeah, it's a bit small for everyone.
All right, here we go. There we go. Oh, they gave us a bad copy, but all right. So this is from 3.7 of the report. It says cultures, arts, and public broadcasting ensure that the public funding to cultural institution, artists, broadcasters, and individuals is not used to support or implicitly endorse anti-Semitic themes or narratives, which is like there are a massive list of, every woke lefty in the last 2 years. They'll lose funding if that is really implemented, but it's just not going to be. That's why I think this is all hot air. It's nonsense. Culture shapes perception. Oh, this is what they were saying. Publicly funded institutions like festival arts galleries and public broadcasters must uphold the anti-discrimination values and be accountable for the narratives they promote. While freedom of expression, particularly artistic expression, is vital to cultural richness and should be protected, funding provided by the Australian taxpayer should not be used to promote division or spread false, distorted narratives. And I think that that's an important point. Like, I'm all for people doing whatever they want on their own time. And but the problem is that a lot of people that are getting the funding and that can get a position in somewhere like the ABC, they hold abhorrent views. And, that institution looks at someone like me and you and says, no, we're too bad to be given a platform on the ABC. But people that actually advocate for the annihilation of my entire family, they're somehow good. They're somehow accepted. And so I think that as the taxpayer, firstly, I think we should just defund it all, let the commercial market. But for starters, don't fund people who are using those platforms to virtue signal how much they hate Jews.
Yep. It's common sense. We've seen, I think Trump did a lot of this without needing a anti-Semitism commissioner as such, in terms of putting the big universities in America on notice in terms of their funding. Which is a major source of the indoctrination, not just anti-Semitism, just all kind of woke ideology, right? He's put all these institutions on notice. He did that via his executive mandate, let's say, and he's also gone ahead and said we're going to deport people like foreign students that are coming in protesting in our country. You're here to study. You want to mess around with these things, we're going to deport you. So that's a firm stance. It's a strong stance that Trump has just gone ahead and done. Where we have Albo deferring to a bureaucrat who spends, a lot of time just, going through documents and history and all this kind of stuff, coming together with some sort of plan that probably will be discussed at length and not implemented, like he said, in many aspects. And it'll just be, he'll say pretty much
months in the making and just days after the latest.
I was just going to say, remember I said this, Ivy, on this show that a few weeks or few months from now, there'll be another incident. Albanese will be up there saying the exact same cookie cutter speech.
Oh, he's this report came out at the perfect time for him.
Yeah, you can get this speech that he has made. You can look back at all the other times that he said the same things. It's the same exact words. Their words hold no meaning because there's no force behind it. They're not doing anything. And that is why it keeps happening. That's the honest truth. So until they start taking direct action, using the laws which already exist in this country to deal with criminal behavior, terrorist behavior, to deal with people who are disturbing Australian society, until they actually just do that, which they can, then no one's going to take it seriously. So play the video.
In a long line of anti-Semitic attacks, this is Gillian Siegel's call to action.
It's not a symbolic document, it's an action plan.
Designed to combat a surge in anti-Semitism since the October 7 attacks that sparked the war in Gaza. Synagogues set alight, cars torched, swastikas scrawled onto buildings.
The idea that somehow the cause of justice for Palestinians is advanced by behaviour like that is not only delusional, It is destructive.
These are not isolated events, and they form part of a broader pattern of intimidation and violence that is making Jewish Australians feel very unsafe.
The wide-ranging plan calls on governments to toughen hate crimes laws and to...
See, like that part, I already... this is where I start to have a problem, because not that I don't think that you should punish those that are committing the crime, actual crimes. I think just... there are enough laws. Like, stop trying to strengthen your powers. There are enough laws in place. Just use them. Like, Friday night, what did we see on Friday night? We saw them storm the restaurant while police were told to step back and let them do it. So how about just use the laws that you have and actually implement them? This is what I mean. Like, I think there are going to be certain elements of this report that I agree with, because they're just plain common sense. But then there's going to be ones that the government is going to give the government the power to completely overreach. And I can promise you, I know which part of this report they're going to implement. And it's going to be the parts that give the government more power instead of actually enforcing laws and doing the things that will actually keep the community safe and hold, like the one that the Sky News was talking about, is hold the ABC and the arts industry, the taxpayer-funded industries, accountable for their role, and to stop funding anyone that breaches it. That they're not going to do. This they'll do. They'll toughen the hate crime laws for sure. They won't force the ABC to sign an agreement that says that if they cross that line and they're found to be breaching it, they're going to lose their funding.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely.
Embed Holocaust and anti-Semitism education in national school curriculum.
Education is central.
Higher education also in...
How do you feel about that part?
The government getting involved in indoctrinating children about, that should be happening anyway.
I think if you're learning history, you'll learn it. Yeah. If you're learning factual history, in recent history, World War II is a massive part of history. So, why is that not just part of the curriculum?
The only thing is, Avi, I think the only thing that could be happening here is the education, the university system is pumping out woke teachers.
And they're avoiding. You think they're avoiding that part of World War II?
That, or the distorting history, not just when it comes to the World War, whatever. I'm talking about Australian history, things like this. Kids that are growing up today have a view of Australia, their place in the world, and of course things like antisemitism, world wars, whatever, based on the teachings of these kind of highly indoctrinated woke teachers. We're seeing more and more.
And you know what you're seeing? You know what you're seeing produced from that when it comes to something like the Holocaust is a reframing of what's happening now, and saying, so basically what they're doing, and the entire left is doing this. You see that? What was that Greens candidate? I saw him today. I'm going to bring it up actually because it makes it's the exact point I'm trying to make, and so I think that there is an inherent danger to let loony lefties focus on the Holocaust, because what they end up doing is they make parallels and let me see if I can pull it up. Parallels to essentially what they do is they talk about how bad the Holocaust was and how evil and how we, and then they basically try to paint it as that's what the Jews are doing now.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening. Yeah,
that is what 100% what is happening. And so if you make these lefties teach it, they are just going to do that. And as opposed to just...
Yeah, I don't know, the way that the government can then force the curriculum. I mean, obviously, there's already input from the government into the curriculum of the school. This focus on anti-Semitism as a educational topic of more prominence, I don't know, if that's kind of what's warranted. I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's just something. It's very clear what's happening. There's a lot of people in this country.
What was his name? What was that Greens? Who? The Greens candidate for Blaxland. Blaxland.
Nah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I'll find him. Yeah.
I forget about I forget about every single Greens name right after the election.
He was the one that celebrated the October 7.
Omar something.
Omar Sakar, yes. You see, you do
Omar
remember.
something, right? I do remember.
Yeah,
See, when
yeah,
you
yeah,
said in the context.
Omar Sakar. Let's bring him up. Come on. Omar What were you saying before I...
No, I'm just saying some like a lot of this stuff is being taught in people's homes. What I talked about last week as well. This is the natural position of many countries around the world. Like, this is the basic understanding that hatred of Jews is a part of just the basics of growing up in many parts of the world, in certain households. And it's a historical thing. And there's things obviously related to what happened post World War II as well that's included in this. But this is a natural state of things. And whether the schooling system in Australia can adjust that, I don't know. I think more directly, we need to have a look at our immigration policies and obviously have consequences for individuals that espouse certain views which are, which are at odds with how we want to live as a society in Australia. I think that's the starting point, and that can only come through leadership. That can only come through direct actions from our leaders. And we're not seeing that here. We're seeing Trump attempt that. I'm bringing that up again. Trump is attempting to do that in the United States of America by making it very clear that these are the expectations for people that come to America, whether you're a permanent resident or you're a citizen, whatever it is. These are the expectations of Americans when it comes to this thing, especially if you're not a citizen. You are not going to come to this country and try to exert your influence in a manner which disturbs the peace in this country. And we don't have that type of leadership in this country. And, putting it on teachers and kids to learn to the next generation that isn't like that anymore. I don't think that'll work, because it's not coming from the school. Some of this is coming from elsewhere as well.
You see, this is it. This is Omar Sakar, the Greens candidate for Black Zone. It's not that Zionists have become the Nazis now, by the way. They were aligned with Nazism from the beginning, and this is a distortion of what happened. They're talking about there was a very short-lived thing between one of these extreme groups in the prior to the Holocaust. They were trying to connect with the Nazis because they were essentially saying the Jews should all come to Israel. But it's like one fringe, tiny group. But this is the way that they'll rewrite history if you have to, and imply that they were like supporting the Nazis when the Holocaust began. That's a complete revision of this. This alignment wasn't just in wanting Jews to be expelled, to forcibly form the colony in Palestine. Zionists believed in the same ethno-nationalist logics and racial purity fantasies that the Nazis did, nor has that changed. Like, this is the racism of the left, the complete and utter racism of the left. But what I find fun, and this is like, a tolerant lefty, I think, is he gay? I think he's a gay Muslim. Like, it's like, he's cooked. He's cooked. I know that. But he goes, so it's funny to see how angry he is about this legislation. Who else voted for an anti-Semitism overlord to punish dissenters against the Zionist creeps starving babies to death daily? Which is not even true. What an utter fascistic farce. Okay. Get effed, yeah. And then so they've broken it down to this is the ones that they have the issues with, right? Is education general for the envoy resource educate communities, schools, businesses, and public institutions about anti-Semitism and to embed understanding anti-Semitism in law enforcement, government agencies, and the school curriculum. Look, I am feeling uncomfortable with that part, to be fair. I just want to see really what. And I think it can be counterproductive a lot, this kind of stuff, for the reason, like, just even for the reason that it is going to be twisted and turned on the thing. Like, if you're teaching history, then the Holocaust is part of history. It should not be... I just don't think. I think it's going to create a animosity in a younger generation. I can't see it working. Anyways, universities call to withhold public funding to universities or those within they deem to facilitate, enable, or fail to act on anti-Semitism and an inquiry into clusters of anti-Semitism if encampments continue into 2026. I 100% agree with that, and he hates that.
Yeah.
He hates it. He loved how they all loved how Jews were unsafe on campuses. That's what Trump did. Trump absolutely. That is a Trump policy. That one. 100%.
Yeah, that's just Trump policy. Yeah, you can't have that. I mean, of course, there's a tradition of protesting at universities and stuff like this, but these encampments to intimidate other members that go to that university just because of their religion or their faith, because of some disagreement you have again about some foreign conflict, it's not on, and it should never be enabled here in Australia. And it's a disgrace that it did happen for a time being in parts of Melbourne, and I believe in Sydney as well.
But I guarantee you, they're not actually going to implement it. Like, I find this very hard to believe. They're not going to implement that one. They'll implement the first one, the education one. I think they'll implement that because
that's an easy one.
And it's just like woke, more curriculum, like easy, right? To me, I would love to know what they're actually teaching. Like, if you're saying that they need that in schools, I want to know what they're teaching in history about World War II now. I'm sure it's skewed. I just really would love to know what it was. But this one, I agree with, they won't do. Media, a new role for the envoy to encourage media organisation to avoid accepting false or distorted narratives and to encourage public broadcasters to accurately and positively represent Jewish history and culture and make programs that support social cohesion. Look, I agree if it's a taxpayer funded, so encourage media organisation. I'm assuming we're talking about taxpayer funded organisation because I don't know if they're talking about even broader from this.
Well, there is this kind of broadcaster standards, that media code of conduct, which they could change and rewrite. For instance,
from the, because this is just like somebody's made a spreadsheet here. I don't think this is from directly the report. And from the Sky News, I'm assuming they're talking about the taxpayer. I think the taxpayer funded one 100% should be forced to ensure that it's there has to be a proper process. But if I see something, because I see it often, like I have ABC playing here in the back end behind me, and I've seen stuff that is just completely false and unchallenged and just fueling that hate against Jews, whether they use Nasser Mashni, who's the son of a terrorist who loves to go on about my personal conviction when this guy, has been convicted for kidnapping and bashing a kid. You know what I mean? Like,
in the back of a boot.
Yeah, this guy's like, but he presents perfectly for the ABC. He talks really calm. He speaks gently and makes himself sound sophisticated. They love him on there, but he says the most hateful, vile, false shit ever on the ABC. So, and there's no way to really, like, how do we combat that? Like, you have this guy that's become the poster boy, and they love hosting him because he obviously he agrees with their, they agree, they subscribe to his.
Well, I think it's fine if they host him, if they host alternative.
They don't.
No, they get from the Jewish group these kind of fringe
lefties that don't represent
fringe
the Jewish council, the Jewish council that doesn't represent anyone, right? Or if they do put, like today I saw them, they did put the head of the main Jewish organization, which I don't even think is really representative of the entire Jewish community. I think, like, if you're going to look at Jewish communities, organizations, look at the numbers of their memberships, and like the AJA will never, they have the largest membership, they'll never get a spot on ABC. But fine, I'll go with the second one. I'll go with the mainstream body. But then after him, they put this fringe. They didn't put the fringe, what they would consider the fringe right one. They put this fringe far left one that literally represents no one in the community. Look at their membership base. It's nobody. But yeah, like, I agree that I personally think that the mainstream, the ABC, like, there should be no public funding at all for the media, but it should be tied to. I don't know what this is like. If taking on the face of this, it's not that good because the government getting in and like saying that media organisations to avoid accepting false or distorted narratives. What does that mean? Like, how do they avoid? And encourage public broadcasters to accurately and positively represent the Jewish community. Well, great. And to make programs that support social cohesion. Like, it's a whole lot of nothing. But based on the Sky News report, it sounded like they're tying funding to it. I guarantee you they're never going to enforce that. So that one and that one, they're not going to do. The arts, a recommendation that the protocols for the arts festivals and organization to respond to anti-Semitic incidents with public funding able to be withheld, similar to universities. Yep, 100%, because it is a cancer in the arts industry. And you know what? You guys are getting all our money. And guess who the big taxpayer funders are? Jews.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few there. That, like, I would go back to the media one. One of the things that people might not see happening is organizations like the ABC and SBS, because of their DEI hiring policies.
Yep.
A lot of the up-and-coming journalists, a lot of the younger staff, the interns, the producers of these shows and things are from, more diverse backgrounds. And some of them already have their own prejudices and biases when it comes to this issue.
Good point.
So that actually shows through. So what you're getting really is the views and prejudices and biases of people who already have a preformed view that is so ingrained within their psyche and of who they are because of where they come from, their parents come from, their heritage, that they cannot separate that. So
that reporter, what was that reporter? That reporter in Sydney that they always bring up to cover the protests, and he literally he pretties up the terrorist supporters on the street. He legitimizes them, downplays the actual terrorists that they're supporting. You know who I'm talking about? The one on ABC.
Yeah, I think I know. And the thing is, if you had stock standard, go back 20, 30 years, white Australian Aussie journalists, let's say, the ABC today, when it covers a foreign conflict, it would be more neutral. And you have seen them be neutral when they cover conflicts in Africa and Asia, because the people aren't as connected to those issues.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this particular topic, especially if they're kind of the left-wing style journalists, they have already been indoctrinated from university. They've also got their predefined prejudices and biases because of their heritage and their histories and their connections to that part of the world. So therefore, that is what you're getting fed. It is not a neutral view. It is already slanted by the moment that it leaves the pen or the mouth of the person presenting you those views. And in that context, Avi, yes, having some sort of strict guidelines for publicly funded companies kind of makes sense, but whether they will adhere to them or find loopholes and other ways around them.
I'm going to predict tonight what they're going to actually follow. I dare say that Omar Sakar is upset about education, probably, because or maybe less so. He doesn't care because he can tie. He says Zionism is like the new Nazis, or they were. Oh no, he actually says they were always the Nazis. He doesn't like the university one because that's where Greens that's the Greens predators. That's where they prey on their next generation of victims to their cancerous worldview. So that one they would hate. Mind you, I don't see them implementing that. I'll be very shocked if they actually implement that. The media one, I'm very shocked if they implement anything there that's substantial, that's real. So withholding funding to the ABC, for example, if they continue down the road of platforming without, like you said, I don't care if they give NASA again. Caveat is defund it all, but if we're keeping it, is if you're going to have NASA Mashni on, or you're going to have an organization from the left wing of the Jewish community, bring somebody with an actual counterpoint on, because what they tend to do is they try to make the counterpoint to NASA Mashni. So this this jihadi almost guy, whose father was a literal terrorist. They try to say that they kind of present the counter to him as a loony lefty Jew who's also anti-Israel. So it paints his distorted picture, but they're not going to do that. Yep. The arts, I don't think they're going to do that either, to be honest. I don't think so. This is my prediction. You tell us in a minute what you do. Policing, a permanent standing arrangement for law enforcement agencies to cooperate in investigating anti-Semitism, similar to Avalite Task Force, am I pronouncing that right? Set up after the Adas synagogue attack. Yeah, so they'll do that. And it'll be as efficient and as successful as the task force set up after the Adas synagogue attack. How funny is that? They still don't have They haven't
Yeah.
arrested anyone, whether it's the actual people that lit the fires or the ones that ordered them to do so. So that's super effective. They'll do that because that's more power. That's easy. They can just say they started a task force. No problem. Online hate, this is a big problem, this one. Stronger regulation on online speech and algorithms, and the ability to support trusted voices to refute anti-Semitism on social media, plus review of hate speech laws. That they will definitely try do, and they will use this report as the reason. They'll ignore all the top ones, all the ones that we want done, and they'll focus on that one. And I bet you if you
that's the one they want. That's what they want. That's the one. That's the one they're after.
And migration, screen visa applications for anti-Semitism, and ensure that Migration Act effectively facilitate visa cancellations for anti-Semitism. They ain't doing that. And you know what? I would support that one, especially when you're looking at Middle Eastern countries. Look at who you're bringing here. You know what? You go to America, they check your social media. And here they do it too, but not for this. So here they're happy to import people, but if you have like right-wing views, you'll probably get a mark against your name. That's where you'll run into troubles getting into the country. But when you look at a big chunk of the Middle East, and especially those that are active on social media and those are activists in general, they are going to have a trail of Jew hatred in their posts, and no one's ever holding them up for it. Nobody, until there's a mass, until a full-on hate preacher who's got hours of footage where he's straight up calling Jews dogs and demons and whatever other curse words, they never stop them from coming. They're not going to do that. That's exactly what we were talking about. I think anybody that comes into this country should be screened, not just for anti-Semitism, for their, but especially now for everything, for anti-Western values. That's what, if somebody's coming here and they're campaigning against the West online, don't let them in. And a part of that, because I guarantee you, the people that have all those anti-Semitism views from the Middle East or from, those different cultures, they are also sharing anti-Western sentiment. So, you know what? Look for that. If you find anything anti-Western, don't let them in, because they're going to cause mayhem in the years to come.
That should be the biggest red flag. This whole idea that, we're so welcoming, we're so liberal, we have freedom of this, freedom of speech. Yeah, citizens in this country do, but it doesn't apply to foreigners. It doesn't apply to people who are applying for visas. They should be under the strictest of observance in terms of if they adhere to our way of life in Australia. It should be very simple to see that as well. And if there's any, even just a lingering doubt about their ability to fit in with this country and the way that we think Australians, should live in terms of our values and our ethics and our morals, then no, don't students, families, war zones, doesn't matter, refugees, whatever. No, there's other countries that they can go to that might have their particular views. They can join the asylum programs for those countries. Why would you bring in people to your country that hate your way of life? Why would you do that? It's just crazy. You're just inviting. It's like opening a door to someone that's a thief or someone that's going to kill you or whatever, harm your family, giving them the key to your door and letting them come inside.
Exactly.
That's crazy. That's what's happening around the West, and you shouldn't do that. There are plenty of countries, even people in anywhere in the world that are not necessarily Christians, but they support Western values, Western traditions, Western way of life, whatever. Get those people to come. If you want to have immigration, do it this way. There's a legitimate case now that we in these countries in the West do not have to tolerate people that hate us. It's just that simple. And for a long time, this tolerance, like during an active foreign conflict where people are literally, fighting the West in a way, why would you open up a program to bringing people during that time to your country from that actual hot war zone?
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Like these things would have never happened in the past until there was a point of control or a point where people could legitimately figure out what these people's views were. We're bringing in people from that conflict zone in Gaza at a time when the whole place is under chaos, when there's no ability to check who's coming into this country. And it's just irresponsible and crazy.
And we know the statistics of how much support there is for groups like Hamas, which, yes, they are definitely anti-Semitic, but they are also anti-Western values. They are against everything we stand for and hold dear in this country. Do you think, so just looking at that list, do you agree with me, or do you have a different view on...
No, I think I pretty much have a very similar view. I think the policing thing, again, it's just a waste of time in the sense
But they're gonna do it. They'll do it. See, that's an easy one to tick.
Another task force. It's literally just they're just printing out. Oh, this is a task force, and
it's a virtue signal.
The migration one, again, I don't really think they're going to take that seriously. Where it matters.
No. I'll tell you what they'll do. They'll use it to crack down on far right. That's what they're going to do, and that's what they do every time. They're going to go after anyone who has right-wing views, who may have shared a meme that is anti-Semitic trope, but they're not going to do it where it really counts. They're not going to take, because there's going to be they're going to take into account the cultural sensitivities of it. Yeah. It's just like that's when because they chant in those countries about the Jews. This whole from these chants that they chant at these rallies. So, for example, from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's not what the chant was. It's from the river to the sea. It'll be Arab. That's the actual chant. You know what I mean? Like, but all these things, like each one of them, Kaiba Kabu, Yahud, where they're talking about the thing, where they're going to slaughter all the Jews. Like all these things, they're going to say that we have to have the cultural sensitivities. So it means nothing. So even if, I do think they're going to actually they're going to tick the migration one, but they're only going to use it against like far right is what they're going to say. And who gets caught in that basket is probably a lot of people who may not really hold those views, but they shared some meme that they don't even know. But the people that definitely won't get caught up in it are the real threats to the Jewish community. Guaranteed. Mark my word.
And I agree with you. I think the only thing to that is I want to add is it should be applied evenly to everyone. And this is not just about Muslims, it's about every religion, every race, Jews, everyone included. If you have some problem with Australia, the West, the way things are happening here.
All I'm saying in my prediction is that they're not going to do it. So this is a very unique case. And so I can tell you especially since October 7, but it's always been there. That's why I've campaigned on it, for many years before and got condemned for it. But now everybody realizes what I was trying to warn is that it is no secret. In the Islamic world, there is, because it's also just scripture as well. Like it comes from religion as well. And then obviously the added thing about Israel being a Jewish state, whatever. In the Islamic world, Jew hatred is extremely prevalent. And it is actually that when you ask like people in the Jewish community, which groups worry you here most, it's going to be always the Islamic community. You'll have like the Islamic community, and then nowadays you'll have, like if you ask people now to be like the Islamic community, then like the far left socialists, they might not know exactly who they're talking, but they'll be talking about the people that go to the protest. So the far left socialists, and at the bottom of that list of people that worry them, even if it does worry them, the bottom of that list is the far right. Is those neo-Nazis. And that might just be because those neo-Nazis are just such a tiny fringe minority. But they're the ones that the authorities always go after because they're easy. Because it's not, you don't have to be, you don't have to protect them. They're not a protected class. So you're going to pick off the ones that don't really actually truly threaten the Jewish community. And if you're looking like a bunch of, even that caravan hoax and all that, it was all people from the Islamic community. Like a lot of these things that you're seeing is coming from there. Anyways, all right, let's see. Let's move on quickly to the Brad Batten because we're running out of time tonight. Hey, let's read a couple of super chats, do the a couple of Victorian things, and
let's do it.
Call it a night.
Andrew Taylor, thanks for the super chat, mate. Do we need a reform party? Because the libs are done. I do hear rumblings of people saying, just bringing up the name, we need a reform party here. I don't think it's going to happen in the extent that it's just a mess when we get to election time, all the little minor parties fighting each other. They never join up. It's just all wishy-washy, hopeful things. Unless, again, like I said before, Ravi, we have that some sort of dominant third-party leader come in that kind of galvanizes the public and, you know,
and it's not going to be Clive Palmer. And spoiler alert, it's not Clive Palmer.
Yeah, I mean, look, it needs to be someone that can kind of cross over to all parts of Australian community. That's the thing. A lot of people, especially people who kind of talk about ethno-nationalism, these nationalistic ideas, they tend to appeal just to one segment of the community as being kind of what will come up and save Australia, for instance. And I don't believe that. I think the demographics have changed so much that you have to be able to cross over and speak to a lot of different people about the future of this country, where it's headed, and what can be done to change that. Because, you know, the government, whatever you may think of them, they're very sneaky, they're very smart, Labor and Liberal, and a lot of what they do is about appeasing these foreign interest groups or foreign groups or religious institutions. One of the biggest ones that's not in there, Avi, in that little thing that we saw, the policing education, is that like the relationship between governments and religious institutions, for instance. And the funding that they give, or the what's it called? Like the grants.
Yeah, grants. That's actually. I wouldn't mind to look at it whether they actually explored that at all, because that would be
the grants. Exactly, for building temples and other religious areas. Like,
I guarantee they didn't for the same reason. They wouldn't do that one for the same reason why they won't touch migration. Because really, like if this is coming specifically from the perspective of anti-Semitism, which religious organisations are going to be pushing, at risk of conducting stuff that are anti-Semitic? It's going to be Islamic community. So there is no way that they're going to cut grants because of what's being preached in mosques. It's just not going to happen.
But that's the most obvious and easy one.
I know.
That is one where the government could fundamentally change the discussion. But they won't do that. That's
at
the easiest
at a grassroots level in the real world, not online on some stupid app. Yeah, you're right. Let's go here.
It's from UFO Bro. Thanks for the super chat. I love your journalism, Avi, so keep it up, brother, and let's stop this hatred amongst us human beings, religious or whatever. Aspirational stuff, UFO Bro, Avi.
I agree. What do we got here?
Equity, thanks for super chat. This elbow rhythm sucks. I think that's what Albanese was on. The elbow rhythm. Baz the Dark Horse. Elbows take away from the report. More power to the Karen defunded the ABC. Yeah.
I think it's definitely more power to the Karen. I don't think he's defunding ABC. Look, it'll be interesting to see what they actually plan to implement from that. But I'm concerned, and I'm concerned because they're going to say they're implementing. Like the migration one's a perfect example as one that they're going to say that they're implementing, but it's not going to be really dealing with the problem. But you know what? We'll watch it closely. We will.
Yeah, let's see.
FOI. I'm gonna file FOIs to see who they're doing. Who have you landed on? Who have you landed on when you've searched for their socials for anti-Semitism? And if you're hitting all Anglo people, I'm gonna start getting a little bit suspicious.
Catherine, thanks again. New T-shirt: anti-Semitism equals Jew jealousy.
Yeah, and I reckon
idea for you, Avi.
I reckon that every T-shirt goes up $1 when you buy one.
No comment.
Smart man. All right, what have we got here? Brad Batten. You've sent me this. I actually wasn't fully. I heard something vaguely while I was working today, but let's bring it up full. Brad Batten, which is Victoria's opposition, Victorians' right to go about their daily lives free from harassment, obstruction and intimidation will be restored under a Liberal and Nationals government in Victoria. A new policy announced today will introduce a protest registration system which balances the right to peaceful protest with the right of others to live, work and worship safely. This is a fair and practical policy that protects the right to protest while ensuring the rights of others to go about their lives are respected. It's about restoring balance, keeping people safe, and supporting Victoria Police to do their job properly. What is your initial reaction? Although we can watch, I think there was. Let's quickly watch Tony Abbott and then we'll react to it.
Yep.
Go Harvey Norman 10 days of deals. Hot offers dropping daily.
What's the deals?
The powerful MetaQuest 3S virtual reality headset, now only $418. Hot deals on laptops, like the Acer Aspire Lite with 16 gig RAM, now under $600.
Is that good?
Hot deals on mobiles.
Pretty
Samsung
crap,
S24 FE save
Crap.
$350.
Don't
Hot
buy it.
deals on headphones.
What about these headphones?
These are good headphones.
Good headphones?
Plus
Yeah, they're
more
good.
Hot one-day only deals in store and online.
What are we doing, bro? Reviews on Harvey Norman.
Ends Monday.
You got to get a sponsorship, mate.
I better.
We'll review them.
Tony Abbott has called for a major police crackdown on protests following the attempted arson attack at a Melbourne synagogue. Speaking to Peter Credlin last night, Tony Abbott says Jewish Australians have been under relentless attack since October 7, and he urged police to take a harder stance on protests against Israel.
Just as the police cracked down hard on the freedom protests during the pandemic, there's nothing to stop them cracking down hard on these pro-Hamas Jew hatred protests. They've been going on for far too long.
So, interesting. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I get
Tony Abbott has called for a major police crackdown on protests.
I definitely get the need to address what's happening in Victoria and Melbourne, and I understand where, specifically where Brad Batten, the opposition leader's coming from, to try to address that. And I get the whole concept around the permit system, and in a civil society where everything's above board and everyone's respectful, the police are respectful of protests, the government's respectful. There's no overstepping of rights and things like this. I think something like that works, and in normal conditions, even in these conditions, it might work for it. The only place of concern for me, and just touching on what Tony Abbott talked about, is that can you imagine, Avi, if people were applying for permits during the COVID protests, would they have been approved? No,
they weren't.
They would never have been approved by the state, even though it was legitimate rights. That I truly believe this, of Australians to voice their dissent against the government. Like, why would you want a permit for that at that particular point? Because they would never give you a permit. So that's my argument. Because the extremes of it, the extremes at the extreme end of it, might work for this situation, but one day it's going to be used against.
But let's unpack it a second, because so the COVID situation, you're right, they wouldn't have given permits, but it was illegal to protest anyways.
That's right. That's true.
So what did it matter that there was no permits?
No, there were moments of time when it was illegal to protest, right? There were times when you could have 15 people at a protest. They're like weird things, like weird gathering, all this stuff, right? But imagine.
But I think during COVID you could have. So I think during COVID, in the way that, so the ways they got around the permits at the time, or the rules around gatherings, it would have applied to a protest as well. Like, protest permits in New South Wales they have. That's why they've never really had the dramas between Antifa and right wing groups. Police. Yeah, because they've always managed because they have to be registered. They register them in different places. I think that there has to be, if you're going to implement a permit system, it would have to have an underlying thing that guarantees the right to protest. So there is a massive problem in the city now, and the city is unsafe every week for big parts of the community, not just the Jewish community. It's definitely not just the Jewish community. You're seeing, every couple of weeks, some average Aussie is getting caught up with it and either attacked or whatever. The busker, the guy that went to the footy. Like, there's video after video, and those are the ones that are just captured on camera. That's not the abuse that people sustain every time they just go there. People always report about it. Like, you see people posting about it online, the way that they're abused and attacked and that in the city. So I think we've gotten to a point, we're coming up to 2 years of this, that I understand the argument. And I'm somebody that was, I was against, I think, permits for protest, but I don't see another way around it now. Having said that, I think that there has to be something that protects the fundamental right to protest, even their protest. I just think it needs to ensure that people can go, it is balancing your right to protest, because even like in Victoria, Extinction Rebellion, Antifa, the Victorian Social, like there is literally an entire culture of protest here that, you know, if you want to plan to go into the city and you just happen to do it on a day that you didn't realize that you're screwed. You're so screwed. So I think there has to be some sort of system that allows people to protest, but also manages.
Yeah, I think it can be something where it's done in a way where the default position is that all protest is, of course, allowed. The permit thing can just be a matter of formality. Let's say we go down that wet path. And the only time it should, I think, be enforced is if these groups, especially ones that regularly protest, do have interactions with members of the police or the public, and they do cause violence or disturbances. I think then it can be escalated maybe. I think there's potentially a solution. It's not as elegant.
But also, it's like in this case, right? It's about, so when you do a permit system, because these groups, they never work with the police. They make a point of not working with the police. So then the police are kind of guessing where they've got to be, what resources they need, and then if they split off into different groups, as this one on Friday night did, and they do that every week. There were actually different Facebook, Instagram groups of like break-off groups from the big protest, and they're literally just trying to make it hard for police to manage, which really is about public safety, not their safety. It's about everyone else's safety. So for the police to keep the city safe, these guys are making it as difficult as possible. So if you have a permit system, it means that they have to stay within whatever the applied permit, so they can apply for a permit, and as long as it doesn't say we're going to take over the entire city every week, because you're not literally you are not most of the people that are going to that protest don't even pay tax. We're paying tax to maintain the city, and we don't get to use it.
Yeah, look, potentially other solutions may be designated areas that people can protest. That might be a solution. Like it is kind of every weekend to have the city of Melbourne come to a standstill, especially with the tram system that we have as well, and the bike lanes, and the infrastructure is already pretty crap. Add to that a mix of people blocking major roads every single week, and sometimes during the weekday as well. It is an inconvenience, and people will say, well, what's people's bombs dropping overseas, so you can be inconvenienced here. There's a limit to everything, of course. And we just want to live in a society where every week everyone's lives has to be paused for a moment of time because of whatever grievances a group has. I don't think we should live like that. So designation of protest areas, it's a shame that in front of our public government buildings where a lot of these protests potentially should be happening, there is no protest space. Like Parliament House literally is in smack bang in the middle of a public major intersection street, Burke Road, Spring Street.
Yeah, but it's not that, you know what? It's not even a problem. They could use that space because if you think of the
surrounding street,
like you can actually get around. Like there's nothing that you actually have to get to that's right there. So I think it's fine if they want to protest there every week, even in that spot, because it is actually at the edge of the city. It's kind of out of the way there. It's when they go from there and then they purposely go through to Flinders Street every time, and then they break off to little groups. I think there is a space for actual like working with authorities to make it safe for everyone else, and I think enshrined into it has to be the right to protest, even if it's a protest we don't like. That's the point. But I think that's what they're arguing as well. And I think the point that Tony Abbott was sort of making, that I don't know if he made it in the best fashion in that interview, but we did see during COVID them smashing people's heads in who were actually peacefully protesting, and now we've had almost 2 years of them where so often they turn violent, but nothing. They're going around and actually intimidating people, and nothing. There's no police, Friday night, police made the conscious decision to order the cops, so command ordered the cops not to intervene when a splinter group of the protest, a large splinter group of the protest, you had 30, 40 people there from the footage at first, just going to disrupt a private business. So I think that, we saw heavy-handed policing during COVID, which was completely uncalled for. Yep. And now we're seeing no policing when it is totally called for.
Yeah, look, I'm someone that witnessed a lot of that, like as you did, Avi, and we called it out for what it was at the time because it was attacks against innocent members of the public. But the moment that you do start attacking public infrastructure, or you start putting in danger, other members of the public in the commission of your protest, then it does cross a line, and that is when law enforcement needs to step in. And like Tony Abbott said, as harsh as it might sound, there are times when police are required to act in the interests of the rest of the public, and I think those times have come to Victoria Police many times over the last couple of years, where they've stepped back and allowed that violence to happen in our city. So these protesters have been more and more emboldened. I think that's why the attacks have gotten worse. So I do agree that there has to be times where police do take enforcement and action. We can't just have a lawless society where people can just go around rioting and beating people up on the street because of something that's happening overseas. So yeah, whether that permit system means that if that permit has a bunch of rules about how you protest in terms of your interactions with the public, and once that's breached, it gives the police more powers to just kind of arrest people and throw them away, for a day or whatever, or whatever needs to happen in that instance. I don't know if that'll help, because like these groups again, Antifa, the far left, they have no respect for the systems of government. They have no respect for law enforcement. It's all about ACAB and these type of views. Even some of these pro-Palestinian groups, they have no respect for the authority of the Australian government. It's made very clear in the messaging of their protests. So would they cooperate when they, in this action? I don't know. I think it might embolden them more to protest in ways which are disruptive. So it's Melbourne, it's Victoria, New South Wales seems a lot more civilized than us when it comes to this issue. So there is that to consider.
Okay, I've got quick two more things to touch on. We'll stay in Melbourne for a second. There's a post from Jacinta Allen which has certainly got people very passionate on X. She's gotten absolutely ratioed with over 1 million views, and you can see 2.7 thousand comments to 750 likes. We're delivering more social homes in Pascoval for residents like Julia. It means a place to call home, close to her family, services and public transport. Let's just watch this promo video. I'll just turn up because I think she's got some music there, I think.
So, Julia, congratulations. You've just picked up the keys.
Thank you very much.
To your brand new, beautiful home.
I'm so happy.
And what's particularly important about this location for you? You were saying it's close to family?
Yes, very good area. My whole family here. I'm so happy.
You've got quite a few grandchildren who are close by.
Very important, my grandchildren.
It is. And so tell us a little bit about your new home.
I'm so comfortable. I'm so happy.
It's modern, it's fresh.
Yeah, very modern, very clean.
And close to good public transport. You've got services close by.
I think walking 6-7 minutes walking, and train stations.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
That is great.
When you're more older, it's catching train.
Can we have a bit more of a look around your beautiful new home? This is the bedroom, the main bedroom. Got beautiful light.
Yes.
Open windows. So this is the bathroom. How lovely.
Yeah. Very big.
It is very big.
Other place.
Not so big. Oh, that's the laundry. Yes.
Yes. Beautiful.
What's a good storage?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Very big.
I mean, this is your kitchen area. Fantastic. And all the modern appliances. I can see you settling in so well here, Julia. It's been so wonderful.
Yeah. It also comes with if they wish to install a dishwasher.
Yeah.
When they get older.
Yes.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. Well, I feel very privileged to have visited you on the day you got your keys. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy.
the ultimate virtue signal that was, but
That
what's
is,
your reaction?
yeah. Well, Jacinta Allen's no dummy. She knows exactly what she's up to and what she's doing. And interestingly, I was just to say, I think there's some recent polls that came out that shows Labour are set to actually win the next election as well. So a lot of this people, as many people are complaining online, this is what people in the state of Victoria have been voting for. But there has been a visceral reaction to this. And look, I don't know the circumstances of this particular lady, Avi. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to, be quick to jump into this and, make all these assumptions about her. But we do hear things like you're going to be close to family, you have grandchildren. The actual property itself, the social housing, I mean, it's come up a lot. It looks like a fairly decent place. And we are talking about these type of videos when there is a housing crisis in Australia. And a lot of the sentiment is, online especially, is that Australia, I don't know exactly. I don't know this lady's circumstances. I just want to make that clear. I don't know if she's a resident, citizen, when she came. I don't know any of these things. But
To me, you know what? To me, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No,
Yeah,
but to me,
go
it's
for
just
it.
weird that you came here at some point and now living on the system. Like, what's going
exactly.
on? What's the breakdown here? Like, did you just get here and so? Are you just completely an Australian charity case? And a lot of the comments here is like, how many homeless people do we have? How many veterans do we have living rough? Like, how are we bringing people here that are already at that age that they're? I don't know her story. I don't know. Maybe her kids are the ones that came. I don't know. But it is just weird why we as the taxpayer are funding this when we have so many Australians that don't have anything.
Yeah, the priorities of citizens of this country, of course, has to come first. You would think, but it is a jarring kind of video to watch.
And she might be she might be a citizen. The point is, if she's a new citizen, if she's a new citizen, why is a new citizen like at that age? So why are we bringing in people that we have to fund forever
to get housing?
Obviously, for the rest of her life because she's not getting younger. Or if she's been here for a long time, then why hasn't she integrated in a way that she can afford housing? And what about if I'll just read some of these.
No one else can. Young kids here can't afford housing.
Exactly.
And they can't get a place like that, for instance, with government support.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a fairly nice apartment or a studio, whatever it is. It's a large bathroom, large living area, large kitchen. I mean, to get something like that, even on the rent in that area, the suburbs, is very expensive. So there is something definitely that's mismatched in the messaging from the government during this time, and people are angry. So we can read some of the comments.
Yeah, Lisa, this is one of the top comments, I think. Her comment is actually a ratio of the actual post. Meanwhile, Australian single mums live with small children in their cars and wash them in public toilets before school labour is sick. That is kind of, that's driving that point home to a part that's really real. Like, how are we at, I can't imagine a scenario where it makes any sense that new citizens or new people to this country suddenly given these brand new nice apartments while people that were born and bred here are sleeping in their car and washing their kids in toilets.
I don't know who lives with her. There might be other people living in that house as well, and she just happened to appear in the video. But they do say your family's nearby, you have grandkids and all these kind of things. So, I mean, she's someone that seems to have some type of community and family support as well. There are people in our society that don't have any of that and who are struggling to have housing. So this is kind of where people are getting worked up about this because it does not make sense. But as angry as people are online, I think the workshops or whatever the Labor Party have done, and the kind of people they're trying to attract towards them, I feel like they think this is a winning strategy.
The Conservative, there's another comment that's got a lot of support on more. It's still ratio to her post. This is tone deaf. How many Aussie citizens will be sleeping on the streets tonight? Does this dimwit premier not understand the community resentment to mass immigration, or does she just like rubbing the salt into open wounds? You know what? You can say that, and I agree with that sentiment. But the fact is, Victoria keeps voting him in, so it's obviously resonating with that minority, and that's the thing. The more you import the more you import votes, the more you're going to want to import votes. And that's the way I see it being. Read this super chat and we'll do our last story unless you want to add something.
From Blade. Thanks for the super chat. It's a technical question. Quick question. If we use a VPN and change our country to something other than Oz, would that avoid the Vic hate laws asking for a friend? So technically, in terms of accessing information, potentially sometimes, depending on how the site or the service is designed, you might be able to use a VPN to access it like you're from a different place, and you might see more of the internet. That's always possible. There are ways that they can kind of clamp down on that as well, but still there are ways around it with VPNs and other services. If you're thinking perhaps that you use a VPN and then you post something online showing that you're from overseas and you still use some sort of illegal hate speech that's illegal in Victoria or Australia, they can still come after you. It doesn't matter that, as long as you're in this country, you're subject to the laws of this country.
But they might struggle to prove it. That's a good point.
They might struggle to prove it, but they might find other ways to prove it. So that's the thing. I don't know.
I wouldn't rely on it too much.
No, I wouldn't rely.
But VPNs are good around getting through blocks of sites and things like that. But when it comes to hiding
laws and
hiding your footprint, if they're really keen on getting you for something and proving that you were here, I dare say that at some point they're going to be able to do that.
And this other thing about VPNs is a lot of these VPN companies, so they actually keep logs of everything they do, and they're actually subject to government intervention in terms of getting access to those logs. So technically, you could still be tracked through VPNs, but there are a few companies that are available, I think, from certain countries.
Yeah, so
where
where countries that have strong privacy laws, like I think it's like Switzerland.
There's a few services. So if you look up those type of services,
but even they are subject. It is just about the process the government has to go through is a lot harder. So it's like they got to go through a court. There you go.
Treetop Music, thanks for the super chat. Jacinta and the magic Muslim block vote.
And it's not. It's actually like,
but it's true.
It's true. That's what they do. Like with the one, that's like renaming the park that you mentioned before to the Indian. Like that, they're trying to appeal. Like that video is 100% designed to appeal to that community, so that they get the support in return for votes. 100%. Everything that they do is the problem here is, so it works in line. It's what I said before. Like, they need those votes to get back into power. So they're going to bring more people in that are more. It's a cycle.
As offensive as I might sound to people right now, the Labor government in this state and in this country potentially looks as white Australians and does not value their vote as being of consequence to them retaining power. They see that power coming from elsewhere. And that's what's going on. That's what's shaping the direction of this country as well. It's happened to degrees overseas. It's happening here now. That's what you're seeing.
Because I think the white vote has always essentially, like when you talk to white people, it's like they're either traditionally liberal or their family's like old Union Labor, and that's it. Like they still vote that way. Your vote's not really up for grabs. The ones that they're importing, they're literally picking them because they know statistically where they're going to land. 100%, I believe that.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong. That's why right now, I do not see a future with ever a Liberal Party. It is some scary times ahead. And not even that the Liberal Party is good, but just like anywhere.
And if you're wondering why the Liberal Party is being like Labor light, it's not because of other work stuff. It's because they're not sure how to corral the immigrant votes towards their side.
Exactly.
And they're kind of confused right now in what to do.
There we go. Just one more super chat.
The great AM. Thanks for the super chat. Best way to recenter the culture politically is a two-step. One step, only taxpayers vote. Step two, only men vote. Interesting. I mean, the taxpayers thing, yes, I think there's some, reasonable justification you could find for that. Only men vote. You can have debates about that. We could get into a segment of.
I'm not getting into it. I want to live tonight.
We can bring in our, Andrew Tate and have a discussion about that stuff as well.
I think just ban Andrew Tate from voting. Okay, last story, going back international. Let's have a quick watch of this.
The US government is sanctioning the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, accusing her of engaging in a campaign of political and economic warfare against the US and Israel. North America correspondent Carrington Clark has more.
There seems to be quite a major escalation as the Trump administration continues to take action against those who they see as critics of both Israel and the United States as a supporter of Israel. Francesca Albanese has become one of the most high-profile, outspoken critics of Israel and supporter of the plight of the Palestinians in the occupied territories. She has a role as an independent member of the United Nations, and her role is to be focused on human rights abuses and the plight of the Palestinians. But in that role, she has been critical of Israel's conduct, particularly in Gaza, and she has accused them of genocide, an accusation which Israel rejects wholeheartedly. But this is after we had already seen the US government take action against members of the International Criminal Court after they chose to go after and to put in warrants in place for high-level Israeli officials. Now, we are waiting to see exactly the details of what this will mean, but the timing is, of course, important. At the moment, we have the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, in Washington for a multi-day trip. Today, he's met with the Defense Secretary here, as well as the Republican leader of the Senate. And you would have to think these two events are connected. Donald Trump still says he is confident that we could see a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. But this, once again, seems to be a clear indication that the United States...
We don't need to listen to the way they're playing it down. I'm actually going to look at what... because I like the way they play down what the allegations against her are. She is horrific in her, and I'm laughing. I'm laughing that they are taking her on because she is literally a terrorist sympathiser. And, you know, she's best friends with Nasser Mashni, the son of the terrorist here in Australia. She's like another example of like public funding of the ABC. Like, these people should not be funded. They should, if you're going to have somebody in that role, have somebody that really does care about human rights, not is a, you know, like UNRWA, like that organisation that essentially became a tool for terrorists. But
yes, I mean, the UN as an organisation, obviously, we discussed the WHO. We've seen just how influential these global bodies want to be. And they try to exert their influence in ways which sometimes does actually undermine the foreign policy of the United States of America. And the Trump administration is not having any of it. And that's why you're seeing these actions against people that they see as agitators and people who are really, you know, from Marco Rubio, from my understanding of the Trump administration's view, these people are standing in the way of the peace process. It sounds crazy for an organization like the UN to be maybe accused of things like this, even the ICJ, the criminal court. But there are sometimes these global bodies which their interests actually rely on a conflict being ongoing. That is their bread and butter. And sometimes, you know, whatever your views may be, go for it. Play the video.
No, I'm not playing a video. I'm just... Because the point that I was making is that the ABC, because the ABC loved her. She was a darling. She came on, remember, she was on that, she did the press club, then she was recently Q&A, and they just gave her a full platform. And the way they legitimize her is they say that they try to present her as somebody that's impartial, and a UN worker, so she must, you know, and human rights. It's all these, everything together to paint the picture that she's not somebody that has a very strong anti-Israel and anti-Jewish worldview, and she does. Like she, you know, the comparisons that she's made many times is Israel to Nazi Germany, where she goes on about the Jewish lobbies. So like old traditional anti-Semitic tropes, which think what you want. The point is that this is literally This is like, how do you want to get on top of the Jew hatred when the people that you're saying are impartial and that are they're actually the ones that are meant to be that are leading it, and they're leading by showing by okaying these kind of othering the Jews and making it out like there's this big conspiracy that the Jews just control the world. Her response to October 7, Albanese emphasized to consider the context in which decades of oppression, this is what she wrote in response to October 7, decades of oppression imposed on the Palestinians was the context of October 7. Like on October 8, she followed, I think she posted that. So this is somebody that is in no way, shape or form impartial. She is a far left-wing activist, just like those that protest on the streets every week in Melbourne. She's given an official role, and in fact, she's friends with Mashni, who's the leader of that. They're literally friends. On his Facebook today, he's posting their picture together, like calling himself her favorite Palestinian. If that dude's your favorite Palestinian, it gives you an idea of who she is. She is a radical, insane leftist, and the US government has decided, no, you're not going to use this office. It's like giving the power to. It's insane. They're given this role to somebody, and that's the same as what we see in the ABC. It's like giving people the keys to and to gate the power to gatekeep information. So whether it's Karen or whether it's the ABC who gets the platform to project their worldview and the microphones to do so without any oversight and without being held responsible for what you do. It's like, fine, you know what? She can go be an activist, but go be an activist. Yeah. Don't pretend that you're working for the United Nations, for the good of the world. You're not.
Yeah. And look, Trump administration, they took themselves out of the WHO, for instance. They are not friendly to the UN in the way that, the woke right now has all of a sudden become like, the UN this and UN that. It's so interesting that people who admonish the UN as globalist body that, is a part of the people that are controlling everything. And all of a sudden when they have a view that, that they agree with, it's like, oh, well, we've got to protect the UN and it's important and Trump's going against the UN and, just complete nonsense. A lot of us know, like, I think it was the Saudi Arabia or Iran or one of these the countries were put as a leader of the Human Rights Council in the UN. That's all you got to know about the UN and what type of body it is.
I know.
It's highly political. When you hear these things about a UN vote that says that all these countries are against you, well, literally, a lot of these countries, these small, despot states, these African nations and Asian nations who are beholden to countries like China and Russia, they will vote as a bloc for political interests. It is not about this
the Arab League. Like, why do you think there's so many
moral thing going on there?
No, 100%. And why do you think there's I think there's been more what do they call them? The thingos passed in the UN against Israel prior to October 7, before the war, then in the period in the time of the civil war of Syria by tenfold against Israel. So in peacetime in Israel, when there was a civil war in which they were killing hundreds of thousands, there was still more things passed against Israel in that period of time because of those voting blocks. You have the Arab League, which straight away is and it's all their friends, and it's Russia and it's China against the West and Israel. It is just such a corrupt organization that I think we should all leave it and it should be disbanded. Like, it's just it's so
I do agree that it's basically just a thing that the US and some of these European nations set up to control elements, control everything else. In a way, have dialogues and meetings. That all makes sense. Foreign diplomacy, all that stuff is pretty and nice. But when it comes to serious things, the Trump administration does not give a crap if it does not match US foreign policy. And people like Albanese, this individual, is getting in the way, I believe, of the peace process with the things that they're trying to do. So they don't want that. They want to move ahead. They want peace in the region. They want to push that process
Albanese,
through.
I can guarantee you Albanese doesn't. She wants, this is her bread and butter.
These people want forever wars. That's like, there's people in the UN that want these forever wars to go on because it benefits their organization and their thinking, or they have a predefined outcome which they want to achieve at all costs. And that doesn't always work when you want, someone like a Trump wants to find some type of mediated peace that's in the interest of course, the West, but everyone. And it doesn't work for Albanese because these people are radical extremist activists.
Yeah.
And their goal is whatever you were talking about before. So I have no problem with it. I think if you want to put sanctions on people like this that are interfering in these processes in whichever way, it's fair game.
She can't go to America now. That's what I love.
Yeah, hopefully we get sanctions on the Karen next because she's interfering with our freedom of speech in Australia. If you ever get to talk to Trump or one of his team, we've got to let him know about putting sanctions on the Karen here in Australia and making it stick. Because I'm sure Karen has some US assets that she would not like to.
Frozen. They froze all her US assets. That's true. Okay, let's read these last super chats, and I think we'll wrap it up.
This is from Vincent. Thanks for the super chat. Dr. Joanne Howe, she's currently fighting the abortion bill and she's now touching on hate speech laws. You should talk to her. She's great. We have had her on the show once and we've talked to her a few times.
I like her. She's great. Yeah. She's great value.
She's very passionate about that issue.
Worth following her. Here we go.
Farhan, thanks for the super chat. Shalom, Rukshan, Avi, good stream. Paying all the jizya for all the Bazes, blackfellas, Teds, and Australians in the chat. There you go. It's not offensive because he mentioned everyone equally.
Yeah.
That's what you want. That's pure diversity.
No, there's no 52 genders there. Thanks, Varun.
Oh.
And last but not least, I think.
Ted, thanks, mate. All kids are born innocent. It's the indoctrination of beliefs that become the evil. Lest we forget, Australia is a Christian country. God bless humanity. It's a great message to end on, and it's the truth.
That is the perfect message to end on. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Make sure to smash that like button before you leave. Then hit the subscribe button, then the notification bell. Let them know you want every notification so you don't miss our lives. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. Rukshan, where can they follow you?
You guys, you can find me on X at The Real Rukshan and also follow me on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Look me up at The Real Rukshan on YouTube. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night, a great morning, wherever you're watching from, and see you guys next time.